The scent hit Luna Silvermoon like a physical blow, sandalwood mixed with rain, and something darker, something that made her wolf howl with recognition deep in her chest. Her fingers tightened around the metal railing of the abandoned subway platform as her bones began their familiar ache, the precursor to an unwanted transformation. The new moon hung invisible above the city, which should have meant safety. Should have meant her wolf would remain dormant for another 3 weeks. But nothing about her werewolf shifter nature had ever followed the rules. Luna. The voice echoed through the tunnels, rich and commanding, carrying the alpha authority that had once made her knees weak and her heart race. Now it just made her want to run. I know you're here. Your scent is everywhere, silver and moonflowers. It's been calling to me for weeks. She pressed herself deeper into the shadows of the maintenance alcove, cursing her decision to use this particular route home from the supernatural counseling center where she worked. The abandoned subway tunnels beneath Manhattan had seemed like the perfect hiding place 3 years ago when she'd fled the Nightshade Pack territory. No werewolf would think to look for a shifter in a place so far from the lunar energies of Central Park's sacred grounds. But Kieran Nightshade wasn't just any werewolf. He was the alpha whose fated mate bond she'd rejected to save his life, and apparently, her efforts to disappear into the human world hadn't been as successful as she'd hoped. The silver fire that lived beneath her skin began to pulse in rhythm with her accelerating heartbeat. Her grandmother's voice whispered in her memory, "The lunar magic in our bloodline is both gift and curse, little moon child. Each time you use it, you trade a year of your life for power. But without it, everyone you love will die. I can smell your fear." Kieran's voice was closer now, maybe 50 feet down the tunnel. But underneath it, "Luna, your wolf is calling to mine. After 3 years, the mate bond should be dead. How is this possible?" She bit her lip hard enough to taste copper, using the pain to center herself. Her therapist training kicked in automatically. Assess the situation, identify the emotional triggers, find the path to safety. But nothing in her supernatural psychology coursework had prepared her for facing the alpha werewolf whose rejection had nearly killed him, whose pack had suffered because of her choice, whose deep brown eyes still haunted her dreams. The transformation began without her permission, her human form responding to his proximity like a moth drawn to flame. Her spine curved as her tailbone extended, the sensation both agonizing and euphoric. The familiar burn of silver fire raced along her nerve endings as her lunar magic awakened in response to the mate bond she thought she'd severed. "No, no, no," she whispered, pressing her palms against the cold concrete wall. Each shift outside the full moon cycle cost her precious time, months or years she couldn't afford to lose. But the pull of the fated mate connection was stronger than her will, stronger than the ancient bloodline curse that made loving him a death sentence. Her enhanced senses exploded to life as her wolf nature took hold. The metallic tang of old subway rails, the musty scent of decades-old secrets, the sweet corruption of urban decay, and threading through it all, the intoxicating signature of the one werewolf she could never have. Her hearing sharpened until she could detect his heartbeat, steady and strong, maybe 40 feet away now. Her vision adjusted to the underground darkness until she could see heat signatures painting the tunnels in shades of red and gold. And she could see him. Kieran stood at the mouth of her alcove, 6 feet of lean muscle and predatory grace, his black hair catching the dim emergency lighting like he was something from a paranormal romance fantasy come to life. 3 years had added lines around his eyes and a hardness to his jaw that spoke of difficult leadership decisions and sleepless nights. But he was still beautiful in the way that made her wolf whimper with longing, all sharp cheekbones and intelligent eyes, and the kind of natural alpha magnetism that drew every supernatural being in a 50-mile radius. "There you are," he said softly, and the gentleness in his voice nearly broke her resolve. "My Luna, my beautiful, stubborn, impossible mate." The endearment hit her like a physical caress. Silver fire danced along her fingertips, creating aurora-like patterns against the concrete walls. Her wolf form was fighting to complete the transformation, to close the distance between them and claim what every cell in her body insisted belonged to her. Don't call me that, she managed, her voice rougher now as her vocal cords shifted to accommodate both human speech and wolf vocals. I'm not your mate. I rejected the bond, remember? I chose my freedom over pack politics and arranged supernatural marriages. It was a lie, and they both knew it. She'd rejected him to protect him from the curse that killed every male connected to her bloodline, but she'd never been able to tell him the truth. Better he think her selfish than risk him trying to break a curse that had claimed her father, her uncle, her grandfather, and every other man foolish enough to love a daughter of the moon goddess line. Kieran stepped closer, moving with the fluid grace that marked him as a born alpha rather than one who'd fought for the position. The scent of him grew stronger, not just sandalwood and rain now, but something wild and wounded underneath. Something that made her wolf pace frantically, just beneath her skin. You're lying, he said simply. Your scent gives you away, Luna. 3 years of searching, 3 years of my pack asking why their alpha is slowly dying from a severed mate bond, and your wolf is practically singing with recognition right now. The words hit her like ice water. Slowly dying. She'd known that rejecting a fated mate bond would cause pain for both of them, but the supernatural romance novels she'd read had never mentioned potential death. Her hands went to her throat, where she could feel the phantom chain of their connection, tarnished silver instead of the bright gold it should have been. What do you mean, dying? The question escaped before she could stop it, her therapist's instincts warring with her need for self-preservation. The bond was severed. You should have been able to choose another mate, strengthen your pack position. Should have, yes. His smile was bitter, transforming his beautiful features into something almost dangerous. But apparently my wolf didn't get the memo. Do you know what it's like, Luna? Feeling half of your soul torn away? Watching your pack suffer because their alpha is operating at half strength? Lying awake every night knowing that somewhere out there, your true mate is hiding from you like you're some kind of monster? The pain in his voice made her silver fire flare brighter, casting dancing shadows on the tunnel walls. Her wolf was howling now, a sound of pure anguish that echoed in the supernatural frequencies only other shifters could hear. She'd thought she was saving him. Instead, she'd been slowly killing him for 3 years. I never meant, she started. Luna. His voice dropped to the low rumble that marked an alpha in full command mode. Step out of the shadows. Let me see you properly. You owe me that much. Every instinct screamed at her to run. The silver fire in her veins was building toward critical mass, responding to the emotional intensity and his proximity. One touch, one moment of skin-to-skin contact, and the mate bond would roar back to life with enough force to complete her transformation and alert every supernatural being in the city to her location. But the broken note in his voice, the way he stood there like a man preparing for another rejection, the knowledge that she'd been slowly killing the only man she'd ever loved, it all combined to override her survival instincts. Luna stepped into the light. The effect was immediate and electric. Kieran's pupils dilated, his nostrils flaring as he took in her scent more fully. The silver fire dancing along her skin pulsed in response to his presence, creating patterns that looked like ancient runes and mystical symbols against her olive complexion. My God, he breathed. You're even more beautiful than I remembered. And your power. His eyes tracked the silver flames with something like awe. Luna, what are you? This isn't normal werewolf magic. Before she could answer, before she could explain about bloodline curses and lunar magic and all the reasons why loving her was a death sentence, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the tunnels. Multiple sets, moving with the coordinated precision of a hunting pack. Kieran's head snapped toward the sound, his body shifting into a protective stance between Luna and the approaching threat. The gesture was pure alpha instinct: protect the mate, secure the territory, face the danger. Shit, he muttered. I wasn't the only one tracking your scent. Luna, how many enemies do you have in this city? The footsteps were closer now, accompanied by low growls and the metallic click of weapons being readied. Luna's enhanced hearing picked up whispered commands in a language she recognized with growing horror, the ancient tongue of the supernatural council, the governing body that had issued an execution order for her bloodline decades ago. "Run," she whispered, silver fire now crackling around her like protective armor. "Kieran, you have to run. They're not here for you. They're here for me. If they find us together, they'll kill you just for being in my presence." But even as she said it, she knew he wouldn't leave. It wasn't in an alpha's nature to abandon his mate, and despite 3 years and a rejected bond, his wolf still recognized her as his. The realization filled her with equal parts terror and desperate, hopeless love. The first council assassin stepped into view at the far end of the tunnel, silver blade gleaming in the emergency lighting. Then another. Then 3 more. Luna's silver fire exploded outward in a protective barrier just as Kieran's wolf surged forward with a snarl that shook dust from the tunnel ceiling. The mate bond that should have been dead flared to brilliant life between them, and Luna realized with crystalline clarity that their story was just beginning. The first assassin moved with inhuman speed, his silver blade carving through the air where Luna's head had been a split second before. She ducked and rolled, her partially transformed state giving her reflexes that blurred the line between human agility and wolf grace. The silver fire that coursed through her veins responded to the threat, creating a barrier of mystical flame between her and the council killers. 5 assassins. Kieran's voice was calm despite the chaos, his alpha training taking over as he assessed the tactical situation. His own transformation rippled beneath his skin. Not the painful shift Luna experienced during off-cycle changes, but the smooth, practiced transition of a werewolf in perfect harmony with his wolf nature. Silver weapons, council markings on their leathers. "Luna, whatever you did to piss off the supernatural council, it was thorough." "It's not what I did," she panted, dodging another blade strike while her silver fire lashed out to drive back 2 more attackers. "It's what I am. My bloodline." A crossbow bolt whistled past her ear, the silver tip leaving a trail of burning air in its wake. Luna's wolf senses screamed danger as she realized the projectile was carved with ancient runes designed specifically to disrupt lunar magic. One direct hit would not only wound her, it would sever her connection to the silver fire that was keeping them alive. Kieran moved like liquid shadow, his partial transformation allowing him to flow between human cunning and wolf instinct. His shadow-walking ability activated without conscious thought, letting him step through the darkness between one heartbeat and the next to appear behind the crossbow-wielding assassin. The wet sound of claws meeting flesh echoed through the tunnel, followed by a scream that cut off abruptly. "For left," he reported, already moving toward the next threat. Blood decorated his fingertips, not his own, and his eyes had taken on the golden glow that marked an alpha in full battle mode. But they're regrouping. Professional killers, not street thugs. Luna's silver fire pulsed brighter as her emotional state spiked. Fear for Kieran's safety, rage at being hunted like an animal, and underneath it all the growing awareness that their renewed proximity was making the severed mate bond stronger with each passing moment. She could feel his heartbeat as if it were her own, sense his tactical thoughts through a connection that should have been impossible. "The bond," she gasped, using a blast of silver flame to force back 2 assassins who were trying to flank them. "Kieran, it's not severed anymore. I can feel you in my head." "I know." His voice held wonder despite their life-threatening situation. "Your emotions are like music in my mind. Your wolf is calling to mine in ways I thought I'd never experience again." He caught an assassin's blade on his extended claws, the impact sending sparks flying. "But that means..." "It means the curse is active again," Luna finished, her heart breaking even as silver fire danced around them both like protective aurora. "Every moment we're connected, you're in danger from my bloodline magic. The men in my family line don't die from old age, Kieran. They die from loving us." An assassin broke through her fire barrier, silver blade aimed for her heart. Luna threw herself backward, but she was already off balance from maintaining the magical barrier. The blade would find its mark. Kieran appeared between them like a shadow given form, taking the blade meant for her through his shoulder. The silver burned him instantly, his sharp intake of breath telling her exactly how much pain he was in. But his claws found the assassin's throat before the killer could withdraw the weapon, and another threat was eliminated. 3 left, he growled, silver blood dripping from his wound. And Luna, I don't care about your family curse. You think I spent 3 years dying slowly, just to give up now that I've found you again? The remaining assassins had regrouped, forming a triangle formation that would let them attack from multiple angles simultaneously. Their silver weapons glowed with runic power, and Luna could smell the metallic tang of blessed metal designed specifically to kill supernatural beings. Surrender the moon goddess descendant, the lead assassin called out, his voice distorted by the ceremonial mask covering his features. The council's judgment is final. Her bloodline ends tonight. Moon goddess descendant? Kieran's head snapped toward Luna, his golden eyes wide with recognition and something that might have been awe. Luna, you're from the original werewolf bloodline? The pack that created the mate bond magic itself. My grandmother was the last of the true moon goddess pack, Luna admitted, silver fire now wreathing her entire body as her power responded to the emotional intensity. That's why they want me dead. That's why the curse exists. We're too powerful to be allowed to reproduce. The implications hit Kieran like a physical blow. Moon goddess descendants were legend among werewolf shifters, the original pack blessed with lunar magic, so strong they could create fated mate bonds, heal fatal wounds, and even resurrect the recently dead. But the power came with a price that had ultimately destroyed the bloodline. Every generation grew stronger and more unstable, until the magic itself began consuming those who carried it. That's why you rejected me, he said, understanding flooding his features. Not because you didn't want me, but because you were trying to protect me from whatever killed the other men in your family. The curse activates when we mate, Luna said, tears streaming down her cheeks as silver fire danced between her fingers. It doesn't matter how much we love each other. It doesn't matter that you're an alpha with shadow magic of your own. The lunar power will consume you from the inside, just like it did my father and grandfather, and... Enough talking. The lead assassin raised his weapon, a silver spear carved with so many disruption runes it seemed to bend light around itself. The bloodline dies here. Luna's power exploded outward in a wave of protective fury. Silver fire filled the tunnel like liquid starlight, hot enough to melt metal and bright enough to temporarily blind anyone without supernatural vision. The assassin's blessed weapons offered some protection, but the sheer force of her emotional release sent all 3 of them staggering backward. But the effort cost her. Luna felt a familiar hollowing sensation in her chest, the price of using her lunar magic during an off-cycle transformation. Months of her life, maybe years, traded for raw power. Her knees buckled as the drain hit her system. Kieran caught her before she could fall, his strong arms pulling her against his chest. The moment their skin touched, the mate bond flared like a supernova between them. Luna gasped as his strength flowed into her, the alpha power in his bloodline somehow stabilizing her overextended magic. Impossible, she breathed. The bond should be making the curse stronger, not if we're stronger together than apart, Kieran said fiercely. Luna, I can feel your power in my veins, but it's not consuming me. It's harmonizing, like our magic is meant to work together. The assassins were recovering, their blessed weapons allowing them to push through the lingering silver fire. But something had changed in the tunnel's atmosphere. The mate bond between Luna and Kieran was no longer the tarnished silver of a severed connection. It blazed like molten gold, creating a feedback loop of power that made the air itself shimmer with potential. The prophecy, Luna whispered, her grandmother's dying words suddenly making terrible sense. She said the last daughter of the moon goddess line would either save all shifters or destroy them. I thought it meant the curse would eventually kill everyone I loved, but what if? What if it means your power combined with your true mates could break the curse entirely?
Kieran finished.
His shadow magic was responding to her silver fire, the 2 energies weaving together like complementary forces rather than opposing ones. Luna, what if 3 years ago we weren't strong enough to survive the bonding, but now? The lead assassin's spear flew through the air with deadly accuracy, aimed directly for the point where Luna and Kieran's joined hands rested against each other's hearts. If it struck true, the runic power would sever not just their renewed bond, but their lives as well. Luna's silver fire and Kieran's shadow magic rose to meet the threat as one unified force. Light and darkness danced together in a display of power that transformed the abandoned subway tunnel into something from a supernatural fantasy, something that belonged in the most epic paranormal romance audiobook ever recorded. The spear dissolved into harmless smoke 6 inches from their skin. All 3 assassins stepped backward, their professional composure finally cracking in the face of power they had never encountered before. "Retreat," the leader ordered. "Report to the council that the moon goddess bloodline has awakened its full potential." Standard termination protocols are no longer sufficient. They vanished into the tunnel shadows with the practiced efficiency of supernatural killers, but Luna barely noticed their departure. All her attention was focused on the impossible. The mate bond between her and Kieran was not only intact, it was stronger than any connection she had ever imagined possible. "The curse," she said wonderingly, pressing her hand to his chest where she could feel his heart beating in perfect rhythm with her own. "Kieran, I can't feel the curse anymore. The bond should be killing you, but instead, I feel more alive than I have in 3 years," he said, covering her hand with his own. "Luna, I think your grandmother's prophecy was incomplete. You're not just the last daughter of the moon goddess line, you're the one meant to evolve the bloodline beyond the curse." The implications were staggering. If they were right, if their combined power could somehow break the ancient curse that had plagued her family for generations, then everything she thought she knew about her heritage was wrong. But before she could fully process the revelation, Kieran's enhanced hearing caught something that made his expression grow grim. "More footsteps," he said quietly. "A lot more. Luna, I think the council assassins were just the advance guard." She listened, her own supernatural senses confirming his assessment. 20, maybe 30 sets of feet moving through the tunnels with military precision. The sound of vehicles somewhere above ground. The distinctive whine of silver-blessed weapons being charged with mystical energy. "They're not just trying to kill me anymore," she realized with growing horror. "They're bringing an army. Kieran, everyone in your pack, if they find out you're bonded to me, the council will declare them all enemies of supernatural law." "Then we don't let them find out," he said grimly. "But Luna, I'm not leaving you again. 3 years was long enough. Whatever happens next, we face it together." The mate bond between them pulsed with shared determination, silver fire and shadow magic weaving together in patterns that looked like ancient runes of protection and power. Luna felt tears on her cheeks, but for the first time in 3 years, they weren't tears of despair. "Together," she agreed, raising her free hand as silver flames danced between her fingers. "But Kieran, there's something else you need to know about my bloodline. The council isn't just afraid of what I am, they're afraid of what I can become. And if we're truly mated now." The sound of approaching enemies grew louder, but neither of them moved to flee. Instead, they stood in the abandoned subway tunnel like characters from the most epic werewolf shifter romance story ever told, hands joined, powers intertwined, ready to face whatever supernatural forces sought to tear them apart. "What can you become?" Kieran asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. Luna's silver fire blazed brighter as she met his golden gaze. "The first true alpha female in 5 centuries. And with you as my mate, the first bonded alpha pair since the original moon goddess pack fell." The tunnel around them seemed to hold its breath, as if the very stones recognized the magnitude of what was awakening between them. In the distance, the sound of the approaching supernatural army grew closer, but Luna felt no fear. For the first time since her grandmother's death, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The real battle was just beginning. The Nightshade Pack's emergency meeting had been called for midnight, but Kieran could sense his wolves' restless energy even before he and Luna emerged from the subway tunnels onto the moonlit streets of Manhattan. His pack bonds, the mystical connections that linked every member to their alpha, were humming with tension, confusion, and something that felt dangerously close to revolt. "They can smell me on you," Luna said quietly as they approached the pack's headquarters, a converted warehouse in the meatpacking district that served as both legitimate business front and supernatural sanctuary. Her enhanced senses were picking up the complex cocktail of scents emanating from the building: leather and steel, alpha dominance markers, and underneath it all, the sharp tang of fear. "Your wolves are afraid, Kieran. They think I'm going to get them all killed." "Let me worry about my pack," he replied, though his jaw was tight with concern. The truth was, Luna's assessment was probably accurate. The Nightshade pack had been weakened by 3 years of their alpha operating at half strength due to his severed mate bond. Now, with council assassins hunting the woman who had rejected him, his wolves would be questioning whether their loyalty was worth the risk of supernatural war. But as they reached the warehouse's reinforced steel doors, Kieran felt the mate bond between them pulse with renewed strength. Luna's silver fire magic and his shadow-walking abilities had been weaving together throughout their journey from the tunnels, creating a feedback loop of power that made him feel more like his true alpha self than he had since her departure. "Before we go in," Luna said, catching his arm with fingers that still glowed faintly with lunar magic, "there's something you need to understand about what happened back there. When our powers combined to destroy that assassin's weapon, that wasn't just 2 supernatural abilities working in harmony. That was mate bond magic at its most fundamental level." Kieran studied her face in the amber glow of the streetlights, noting the way her dark eyes seemed to hold flecks of silver now, as if her bloodline power was becoming more integrated with her everyday appearance. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that what we did in those tunnels hasn't been possible for over 200 years, Luna said, her voice dropping to the reverent whisper reserved for discussing the most sacred werewolf lore. The original Moon Goddess pack could combine their individual powers through mate bonds to create entirely new forms of magic. It's how they established the fated mate system in the first place, by proving that 2 souls joined were exponentially more powerful than 2 individuals. The implications hit Kieran like a physical blow. If Luna was right, if their connection was somehow restoring abilities that had been lost to the werewolf community for centuries, then the Supernatural Council's interest in killing her wasn't just about preventing a dangerous bloodline from reproducing. It was about preventing the return of magic so powerful it could challenge the Council's authority over all supernatural beings. That's why they sent an army instead of just more assassins, he realized. "They're not just afraid of you, Luna. They're afraid of us." Before she could respond, the warehouse doors swung open to reveal Marcus Blackthorne, Kieran's beta and oldest friend. Marcus was a compact, powerful man whose easy smile and quick wit usually made him popular with the pack's younger members. Tonight, his expression was grim, and his green eyes held the kind of wariness usually reserved for potential threats. "Alpha," Marcus said formally, his gaze flickering between Kieran and Luna with barely concealed tension. "The pack is assembled and waiting. But, Kieran, before you bring her inside, there's something you need to know." "What kind of something?" Kieran's voice carried the subtle rumble that marked an alpha prepared for challenge, but Marcus had been his second-in-command for over a decade. If his beta was concerned enough to risk pack hierarchy protocols, the situation was serious. The kind where half your wolves are talking about breaking pack bonds rather than die for a mate who abandoned their alpha 3 years ago, Marcus said bluntly. "And the other half are ready to challenge anyone who speaks against your chosen female. Kieran, the pack is fracturing. If you walk in there with her at your side, you might not walk out as alpha." Luna stepped forward, silver fire dancing along her fingertips in response to the implicit threat against Kieran's leadership. "Then maybe it's time for some hard truths," she said, her voice carrying a note of authority that made Marcus's eyebrows rise in surprise. "Your alpha has been dying for 3 years because I rejected a mate bond that I thought would kill him. Tonight, we discovered that our combined power might be strong enough to break the curse that's plagued my bloodline for generations. The Supernatural Council is so afraid of what we represent that they sent a kill team to eliminate us both." Bloodline curse. Marcus's professional composure slipped, revealing the keen intelligence that made him such an effective beta. "Luna, what bloodline are you from?" The moon goddess line, Kieran said quietly, watching his oldest friend's face carefully. She's a descendant of the original werewolf pack, Marcus. The ones who created mate bond magic itself. Marcus went completely still, his enhanced senses no doubt picking up the truth of the statement from both their sense and the visible evidence of Luna's silver fire magic. When he spoke again, his voice held the kind of awe usually reserved for discussing legends. "Holy shit," he breathed. "A true moon goddess descendant. I thought they were all dead." "The council certainly tried to make sure of that," Luna replied grimly. "But my grandmother hid my mother well enough for the bloodline to survive one more generation. Unfortunately, that means I'm carrying magic so powerful it might kill anyone who bonds with me, or might break every supernatural curse that's ever existed. We're still figuring out which." Marcus looked between them again, his tactical mind clearly working through the implications. "The power display earlier," he said slowly. "When every supernatural being in a 5-mile radius felt something like mystical lightning hit the ley lines under the city. That was you too. That was us realizing that our mate bond doesn't just connect our souls, it amplifies our individual abilities into something completely new," Kieran confirmed. "Marcus, what Luna and I can do together, it's going to change everything for werewolf shifters. The question is whether the pack is willing to stand with us while we figure out how to control it." From inside the warehouse came the sound of raised voices, pack bonds crackling with tension as emotional states fluctuated wildly throughout the assembled wolves. Luna winced as she picked up fragments of the heated discussions through her enhanced hearing. "Abandoned him once, she'll do it again. Council kill teams mean we're all targets now. Seen an alpha this strong since before she left. If she's really moon goddess bloodline, maybe. They're scared," Luna said quietly. "And they have every right to be. Kieran, I won't ask your pack to die for me. If they decide that their safety is more important, then they don't get to make that choice," Kieran interrupted, his voice carrying the absolute authority of an alpha who had made his decision. "I am their alpha. You are my mate. Those are the only facts that matter." Marcus cleared his throat diplomatically. "With respect, alpha, pack leadership has always been about consent of the governed. If you push this without giving them a chance to voice their concerns, you'll lose wolves regardless of whether you maintain your position." Kieran's jaw tightened, but Luna could feel through their bond that he knew his beta was right. Pack leadership among werewolves was a delicate balance between alpha authority and collective agreement. Push too hard, and wolves would start breaking pack bonds to join other groups. Push too little, and leadership challenges would destabilize the entire social structure. "What do you suggest?"
Kieran asked.
"Full disclosure," Marcus said immediately. "Tell them everything. The curse, the prophecy, the council threat, the power combination you've discovered. Let them make an informed choice about whether they want to follow you into what's essentially a supernatural war." Luna felt her heart clench at the thought of Kieran's pack bonds being severed because of her, but she knew Marcus was right. These wolves had trusted Kieran's leadership for years, had suffered through his weakened state when she rejected their bond, had maintained their loyalty even when other packs whispered that the Nightshades were vulnerable. They deserved honesty. "And if they choose to leave?" she asked quietly. Marcus studied her with eyes that seemed to see more than she was comfortable with. "Luna, I've known Kieran since we were teenagers figuring out our first transformations. I've never seen him as strong as he is right now, standing next to you. I've also never seen pack bonds as stable as ours have become since you two reconnected." "What does that mean?" "It means," Marcus said with the first genuine smile she'd seen from him, "that your mate bond magic isn't just affecting you and Kieran. It's strengthening every supernatural connection in proximity to you. The pack bonds, the territorial wards, even the building's protective enchantments, everything is more stable, more powerful than it's been in years." Kieran's eyes widened as he realized what his beta was saying. "The mate bond magic is radiating outward? Like ripples in a pond," Marcus confirmed. "Luna, whatever your ancestors did to create the fated mate system, part of it involved strengthening all supernatural bonds within their influence. You're not just potentially dangerous to the people you love, You're potentially the key to making all supernatural communities stronger and more stable. The revelation hit Luna like a physical blow. All her life, she'd been told that her bloodline was cursed, that her power was destructive, that loving her was a death sentence. But what if the opposite was true? What if the moon goddess bloodline wasn't cursed, but blessed with magic so powerful it could revolutionize supernatural society? The council, she whispered, understanding flooding through her. They're not afraid of me destroying the supernatural world. They're afraid of me changing it so fundamentally that their authority becomes irrelevant. A decentralized system where individual communities are strong enough to be self-governing, Kieran said slowly, instead of needing a central council to maintain order through fear and force. Marcus nodded grimly. Which means this isn't just about you two anymore. Every supernatural community that wants independence from council oversight is going to see you as either salvation or a target to be eliminated before the council can use your existence as an excuse for martial law. From inside the warehouse, the sound of pack discussion was growing more heated. Luna could smell the sharp scent of stress hormones and the metallic tang of wolves preparing for potential conflict. They need to see us, she said finally. Not as potential threats or salvation, but as their alpha and his mate who are trying to navigate an impossible situation. Marcus, will you stand with us when we go in there? Marcus studied her for a long moment, his enhanced senses no doubt cataloging every detail of her scent, her posture, the way her power seemed to stabilize rather than threaten the supernatural bonds around her. Luna, he said finally, 3 years ago, I watched my alpha nearly die from losing his mate bond. I've spent every day since then hoping he'd find a way to heal and lead us properly again. Tonight, he's stronger than I've ever seen him, and every pack bond in there is more stable than it's been since before you left. He stepped aside and gestured toward the warehouse doors. Alpha, Luna, your pack is waiting. Luna took Kieran's hand, feeling their mate bond pulse with shared determination and just a touch of fear. Through the connection, she could feel his absolute certainty that whatever happened next, they would face it together. Ready? He asked quietly. Luna thought about the prophecy, the curse, the centuries of her bloodline believing that their power was too dangerous to share. She thought about the pack of wolves waiting inside who had every right to reject a mate who had abandoned their alpha and brought council assassins to their door. And she thought about the impossible magic that happened when she and Kieran touched, the way their combined power felt like coming home after a lifetime of exile. Together, she said, echoing his words from the tunnel. They stepped through the warehouse doors together, and Luna's first impression was of overwhelming supernatural energy. 37 wolves in various states of human and partial transformation filled the converted space, their combined presence creating a tapestry of sense, emotions, and pack bond connections that made her enhanced senses real. The Nightshade pack territory was unlike anything she'd expected. Instead of the traditional den-like spaces most packs preferred, Kieran had created something that looked more like a high-end loft crossed with a supernatural fortress. Exposed brick walls were carved with protective runes that glowed faintly silver in her enhanced vision. Modern furniture was arranged in conversation clusters that could quickly be reconfigured for pack meetings or combat situations. And everywhere, the subtle markers of alpha territory, scent boundaries, hierarchy indicators, the invisible network of pack bonds that connected every wolf to their leader. But it was the silence that struck her most forcefully. 37 supernatural beings, and not one of them was making a sound. Alpha, said a woman Luna recognized as Sarah Chen, one of Kieran's senior enforcers. Her voice was carefully neutral, but her dark eyes tracked every movement Luna made with the intensity of someone assessing a potential threat. The pack is assembled as requested. Kieran stepped forward, his presence immediately commanding the attention of every wolf in the warehouse. Luna felt the pack bonds connecting him to his followers like golden threads in her enhanced vision, and she could see the way those connections had strengthened since their own mate bond had reactivated. My wolves, Kieran said, his voice carrying the authority that had made him one of the most respected alphas in the northeastern territories. Tonight, changes are coming to our pack that will affect every one of you. Before we discuss those changes, you need to understand exactly what we're facing. He gestured for Luna to step forward, and she felt 37 pairs of eyes focus on her with laser intensity. The pack bonds in the room hummed with tension, curiosity, and underlying fear. 3 years ago, Kieran continued, I told you that Luna Silvermoon had rejected our mate bond to pursue independence. That was only partially true. A murmur ran through the assembled wolves, pack bonds crackling with surprise and the beginning of anger. The truth, Luna said, stepping up beside Kieran and letting her voice carry the newfound authority she was still learning to wield, is that I rejected the bond to protect him from a bloodline curse that has killed every male connected to my family line for the past 3 centuries. The murmurs stopped. In the supernatural world, bloodline curses were serious business. Magic so fundamental it could override even the strongest supernatural abilities. What bloodline? Asked David Reeves, a grizzled older wolf who served as the pack's historian and lore-keeper. His question carried the weight of someone who had seen enough supernatural politics to recognize when information was being carefully edited. Luna took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would change everything for these wolves. I am the last known descendant of the moon goddess pack. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the pack bonds seemed to pause, as if the mystical connections themselves were processing information too significant for immediate response. That's impossible, whispered Jessica Torres, a young wolf who had joined the pack only months before Luna's original departure. The moon goddess bloodline died out centuries ago. Everyone knows that. Everyone was meant to think that, Luna replied. My grandmother spent her entire life hiding our family's true heritage to protect us from the Supernatural Council's extermination efforts. Unfortunately, she couldn't hide us from the curse that comes with carrying original werewolf magic. Marcus stepped forward, his role as beta allowing him to ask the tactical questions the pack needed answered. Luna, show them what you showed us in the tunnels. Luna hesitated for a moment, then raised her hand. Silver fire danced between her fingers, but this time she let the power build until it filled her entire palm with liquid starlight. The warehouse's protective wards resonated with her magic, creating harmonics that made the air itself seem to sing. Original lunar magic, David breathed, his historian's training letting him recognize power that existed in only the oldest stories. The kind that created mate bonds in the first place. And the kind, said a cold voice from the warehouse's upper level, that the Supernatural Council has spent centuries trying to erase. Everyone's head snapped toward the sound. On the building's second-floor balcony stood a figure Luna recognized with growing dread, Counselor Victoria Ashworth, one of the most powerful members of the supernatural governing body, flanked by 6 council guardians in full combat gear. Counselor, Kieran said, his voice carefully controlled even as his body shifted into a protective stance between Luna and the threat above. This is Nightshade Pack territory. Your presence here violates supernatural law. Victoria's laugh was like ice-breaking. Supernatural law becomes irrelevant when dealing with existential threats to our entire society. The moon goddess bloodline was terminated for good reason, Alpha Nightshade. Your mate represents power that could destabilize every supernatural community on the continent. Luna felt her silver fire flare in response to the threat, but more importantly, she felt the pack bonds throughout the warehouse strengthening. Instead of cowering in the face of council authority, Kieran's wolves were moving into defensive positions, their loyalty to their alpha overriding their fear of supernatural law enforcement. The only thing destabilizing supernatural communities, Kieran said coldly, is a council that governs through fear and assassination attempts. Assassination attempts. Victoria's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. Alpha, surely you're not suggesting that the council would resort to such crude methods. We simply came to discuss this situation with Miss Silvermoon. By breaking into our territory with armed guardians? Sarah Chen's voice carried the sharp edge of an enforcer who had seen too many council discussions end in bloodshed. Victoria smiled, the expression transforming her beautiful features into something predatory. Insurance, my dear. You see, We've been monitoring the magical disturbances emanating from this location since your Alpha and his mate reunited. The power they're generating together is concerning." She gestured elegantly, and one of her guardians produced a device that looked like a cross between a tablet and a mystical, scrying mirror. The screen showed energy readings that made Luna's enhanced senses recoil, wave after wave of magical force radiating out from their current location like ripples from a dropped stone. "In the past 4 hours," Victoria continued, "every supernatural being within a 50-mile radius has experienced an increase in their individual power levels. Pack bonds have strengthened. Territorial wards have become more stable. Even the ley lines running beneath the city are carrying more mystical energy than they have in decades." Luna felt her heart sink as she realized what the counselor was saying. "You're afraid that our mate bond magic is going to make supernatural communities too powerful to control." "I'm afraid," Victoria said with false gentleness, "that your mate bond magic is going to trigger a supernatural arms race that ends with human discovery and worldwide persecution of our kind. The moon goddess bloodline was eliminated because power of that magnitude cannot be contained or controlled. It spreads, Miss Silvermoon, like a virus." "Or like evolution," Kieran said quietly. "Maybe the reason supernatural communities have been struggling for the past century is because we've been artificially weakened by council policies designed to keep us dependent on your authority." The accusation hung in the air like a challenge, and Luna could feel the pack bonds throughout the warehouse humming with a new kind of tension. Not fear of their Alpha's choices, but anger at the realization that they had been systematically weakened by the very organization meant to protect them. "Careful, Alpha," Victoria warned. "Seditious statements against council authority carry severe penalties." "Only if you're in a position to enforce those penalties," said a new voice from the warehouse's main entrance. Luna spun around to see Elena Moreau, Alpha of the Crescent Moon Pack and one of the most respected supernatural leaders on the East Coast, standing in the doorway with a dozen of her own wolves. Behind her, the unmistakable figures of 3 more Alpha leaders were visible, territorial rivals who had somehow become temporary allies. "Elena," Kieran said, surprise and relief warring in his voice. "What are you doing here?" "The same thing every Alpha within 100 miles is doing tonight," Elena replied, her silver hair catching the warehouse lights as she moved with predatory grace into the space. "Investigating the magical phenomenon that's been strengthening our pack bonds all evening." She looked directly at Luna, her enhanced senses no doubt cataloging every detail of power and bloodline heritage. "And meeting the woman whose very existence is going to change everything for our kind." Victoria's composure finally cracked, her beautiful features showing the first hint of genuine concern. "Alpha Moreau, you're interfering with official council business." "I'm protecting a supernatural being who poses no threat to my territory or my pack," Elena corrected. "In fact, Luna Silvermoon's presence tonight has made my wolves stronger than they've been in years. If that's the kind of threat the council is worried about, then perhaps it's time for a change in supernatural governance." The warehouse had become a powder keg of competing authorities and conflicting loyalties. Council guardians faced off against multiple packs worth of werewolves, while Luna stood in the center of it all, her silver fire magic responding to the emotional intensity by creating aurora-like patterns against the walls. "Enough," Victoria said, her voice carrying the kind of mystical compulsion that marked a council member at full power. "Miss Silvermoon, you will come with us voluntarily, or we will take you by force. Your bloodline ends tonight, one way or another." Luna felt the compulsion try to take hold, but her mate bond with Kieran created a buffer that turned the mystical command into background noise. More importantly, she could feel the pack bonds throughout the warehouse, not just Kieran's wolves, but the visiting Alphas and their followers, all strengthening in response to the threat against her. "Actually," she said, her voice carrying a note of authority that surprised even her, "I think my bloodline is just getting started." She raised both hands, silver fire dancing between her fingers as Kieran stepped up beside her, shadow magic swirling around them both. Their combined power filled the warehouse with mystical energy that made every supernatural being present feel stronger, faster, more connected to their fundamental nature. The choice isn't whether the moon goddess bloodline continues, Luna continued, meeting Victoria's gaze without flinching. The choice is whether the supernatural community evolves naturally, or whether we have to fight a war against those who would keep us artificially weakened. The pack bonds throughout the warehouse pulsed with shared determination, and Luna realized that whatever happened next, she and Kieran were no longer facing it alone. The standoff in the warehouse stretched like a bowstring pulled to its breaking point. Council guardians on the upper level, their silver weapons gleaming with runic power. 4 different werewolf packs on the main floor, their territorial instincts warring with practical politics. And in the center of it all, Luna and Kieran, their mate bond magic creating ripples of power that were affecting every supernatural being in the building. Victoria Ashworth's composure was cracking more with each passing moment. Luna could smell the counselor's stress hormones, could see the way her mystical aura flickered when faced with power she couldn't command or control. "You're making a mistake," Victoria said, her voice still carrying authority but lacking the absolute confidence she displayed moments before. "All of you. The moon goddess bloodline was eliminated for good reason. Their power doesn't just grow, it spreads. Within a generation, every supernatural being on the continent would be carrying enhanced abilities they can't control. And that's bad because," asked Dmitry Volkov, Alpha of the Northern Territory Pack, his Russian accent making the question sound like a threat. He was a massive man even in human form, and Luna could sense the barely contained aggression that made him one of the most feared pack leaders in the region. "My wolves have been stronger tonight than they have been in months. If this is what moon goddess magic does, perhaps we need more of it." Elena Moreau stepped forward, her political instincts navigating the supernatural minefield with practiced ease. "Counselor Ashworth, the facts speak for themselves. Since Luna and Kieran's mate bond reactivated, every supernatural community in the region has experienced increased stability and power. Our pack bonds are stronger, our territorial wards are more effective, even our individual transformation abilities have improved. Because they're all being artificially enhanced." Victoria snapped, finally losing her diplomatic mask. "Don't you understand? This isn't natural evolution, it's magical contamination. The moon goddess bloodline creates dependency. Remove the source, and every supernatural being who's been enhanced will crash harder than they ever have before." Luna felt ice form in her stomach as the implication hit her. "You're saying that if something happens to me, everyone who's been affected by my power will be weakened?" "Not just weakened," Victoria said with grim satisfaction. "Crippled. The mate bond magic your bloodline generates creates artificial strength that supernatural beings become addicted to. When it's removed, the withdrawal can kill." The silence that followed was heavy with new understanding. Luna looked around the warehouse at wolves who had been growing visibly stronger and more confident throughout the evening, and realized that Victoria might be telling the truth. If her power was creating dependency rather than genuine enhancement, then her very existence was a threat to every supernatural being around her. "That's why the original moon goddess pack died out," she whispered. "Not because they were killed by enemies, but because their power was too dangerous to their own communities." "Exactly," Victoria said, pressing her advantage. "Your ancestors realized that their bloodline magic was ultimately destructive, so they chose extinction to protect everyone else. You're being asked to make the same choice." But even as Victoria spoke, Luna could feel something different through the pack bonds surrounding her. Not dependency or artificial enhancement, but something that felt more like resonance. As if her power wasn't creating new abilities in the wolves around her, but awakening dormant potential that had always been there. "You're wrong," Kieran said quietly, his shadow magic swirling around them both in patterns that made the warehouse's protective wards hum with harmonic frequencies. "Luna, I can feel what's happening through our mate bond. Your power isn't making these wolves dependent. It's reminding them what they were always capable of." "Impossible," Victoria said, but Luna could hear uncertainty creeping into her voice. "Is it?" Elena Moreau moved closer, her enhanced senses focused on the mystical energies filling the warehouse. "Counselor, when was the last time you saw pack bonds this stable?" When was the last time territorial wards held this much power? What if the moon goddess bloodline doesn't create artificial enhancement, but removes artificial limitations? Luna felt her breath catch as the pieces clicked into place. "The council," she said slowly. "You haven't been maintaining order by governing supernatural communities. You've been maintaining control by keeping them weakened." Victoria's eyes went cold and hard. "Careful, Miss Silvermoon." "How long?" Luna pressed, silver fire dancing around her as her power responded to rising anger. "How long has the council been using governance as an excuse to prevent supernatural communities from reaching their full potential?" "Since the supernatural wars of the 18th century, said David Reeves, the Nightshade Pack's historian, his voice carrying the weight of someone putting together pieces of a puzzle that had been hidden for decades. "The council was formed after the conflicts nearly exposed our existence to human authorities. But what if the real reason they eliminated the moon goddess bloodline wasn't to prevent another war, but to prevent supernatural communities from becoming too powerful to control?" The accusation hung in the air like a physical presence. Around the warehouse, Luna could see understanding dawning on the faces of wolves who had spent their entire lives accepting council authority as natural law. "You're talking about revolution," Victoria said quietly. "Against an organization that has maintained supernatural peace for over 2 centuries. "We're talking about evolution," Kieran corrected. "About supernatural communities finally being allowed to reach their full potential instead of being artificially limited by bureaucratic fear." "And if you're wrong?" Victoria demanded. "If the moon goddess magic does create dependency? If removing council oversight leads to supernatural wars that expose our existence to human authorities? Are you prepared to take responsibility for the destruction of our entire world?" The question hit Luna like a physical blow. For all her growing understanding of her power and its effects, she couldn't be absolutely certain that Victoria was wrong. What if her bloodline magic was as dangerous as the council claimed? What if her relationship with Kieran was going to ultimately hurt everyone she was trying to help? But before doubt could take hold, she felt the mate bond between them pulse with absolute certainty. Not Kieran's certainty, her own. Deep in her genetic memory, in the part of her that carried the original moon goddess magic, she knew with crystal clarity what her power was meant to do. "The council is afraid," she said, her voice carrying a new note of authority that made every supernatural being in the warehouse turn toward her. "But not of what my power might do to supernatural communities. They're afraid of what supernatural communities might do when they realize they don't need the council's protection." She raised her hands, silver fire dancing between her fingers as she deliberately let her power spread throughout the warehouse. But instead of the wild, uncontrolled release she'd experienced in the tunnels, this time her magic moved with surgical precision, touching each pack bond, each territorial connection, each individual supernatural aura. And instead of creating artificial enhancement, her power simply unlocked. Luna watched in wonder as every wolf in the warehouse seemed to stand straighter, move with more confidence, breathe more easily. Their pack bonds didn't become unnaturally strong. They became exactly as strong as they were supposed to be. Their individual abilities didn't spike beyond normal ranges. They reached the potential that had always been there, waiting to be awakened. "My God," Elena breathed. "It's not enhancement at all. It's healing." "The council has been using mystical suppressants," Luna realized, her power showing her the subtle magical residue that clung to every supernatural being in the building. "Probably built into your governance structure, your official ceremonies, even your territorial registration processes. You've all been carrying mystical limitations designed to keep you at maybe 60% of your natural abilities." Victoria's face had gone pale, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Even if that were true, even if the council has been managing supernatural power levels for the greater good, what you're proposing would still lead to chaos. Supernatural communities at full strength, with no central authority to prevent conflicts, would probably solve their own problems better than a bureaucracy that's been weakening them for centuries," Dimitri interrupted. "Counselor, my pack has been struggling with territorial disputes for years. Tonight, with our bonds at full strength, We've already begun settling those conflicts through direct negotiation rather than council mediation." Similar murmurs of agreement came from the other visiting packs. Luna could feel through the enhanced pack bonds that what Dimitri was saying was true. Supernatural communities at their natural power levels were more stable, not less. More capable of self-governance, not more chaotic. "This changes everything," Sarachin said quietly. "If Luna's power can permanently remove council limitations, then every supernatural community in North America will want access to her," Marcus finished grimly. "And the council will declare total war to prevent that from happening." Victoria smiled, the expression sharp as a blade. "Finally, someone understands the stakes. Miss Silvermoon, your choice is simple. Come with us voluntarily and submit to power suppression that will contain your abilities without killing you. Or stay here and watch as every supernatural being who seeks you out becomes a target for council elimination." "There's a third option," Kieran said, his shadow magic beginning to weave through Luna's silver fire in patterns that made the warehouse's very foundations hum with power. "Luna and I disappear. Find somewhere the council can't reach us, and let supernatural communities make their own choices about whether they want to remain under artificial limitations." "Hiding isn't an option," Luna said softly. "Not anymore. Victoria's right about one thing. Every supernatural community that's felt what full power is like tonight is going to want more. If we disappear, they'll keep searching, and the council will keep killing anyone who gets close to the truth." She looked around the warehouse at wolves from 4 different packs, all of them stronger and more confident than they'd been hours earlier, all of them now knowing that their natural abilities had been artificially suppressed for decades. "The only way forward is through," she said finally. "We tell the truth. All of it. Let every supernatural community decide for themselves whether they want council limitations or natural freedom." "That's war," Victoria said flatly. "The council won't allow that choice to be made." "Then maybe it's time for a war," Elena said quietly. "One where supernatural communities fight for their right to exist at full strength instead of accepting artificial weakness as the price of peace." The warehouse fell silent except for the hum of enhanced pack bonds and the whisper of silver fire dancing through shadow magic. Luna could feel the decision point approaching like a storm front, the moment when words would give way to action and the supernatural world would change forever. "Luna," Kieran said quietly, his voice carrying only through their mate bond. "Whatever you choose, I'm with you. But choose knowing that there's no going back from this." Luna looked at the council guardians on the upper level, their weapons ready for violence. She looked at the werewolf packs on the main floor, their enhanced bonds crackling with newfound strength. She looked at Victoria Ashworth, whose beautiful face showed the fear of someone watching their entire worldview crumble. And she made her choice. "Counselor Ashworth," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had finally accepted their true nature. "You came here to eliminate the last moon goddess descendant. I'm offering you a different option. Leave now, and tell the council that supernatural communities have a new choice. Accept natural power levels and self-governance, or maintain artificial limitations under council authority. And if we refuse to offer that choice..." Luna's silver fire blazed brighter as Kieran's shadow magic swirled around them both, their combined power creating something that felt less like a threat and more like a promise. "Then you'll discover exactly why the moon goddess bloodline was so feared," she said quietly. "Not because our power destroys, but because it reveals the truth about who's really been destroying supernatural communities all along." The pack bonds throughout the warehouse pulsed with shared determination, and Luna realized that whatever happened next, the supernatural world was about to change forever. The first guardian moved within human speed, his silver blade carving through the air toward Luna's throat. But instead of the desperate defensive magic she'd used in the tunnels, this time her response was surgical and devastating. Silver fire wrapped around the weapon like liquid starlight, not destroying it but reforging it into something harmless and beautiful, a sculpture of crystallized moonlight that clattered uselessly to the warehouse floor. "Impossible," Victoria breathed, her composure finally cracking completely. "No supernatural being can transmute blessed silver. No ordinary supernatural being, Luna corrected, her power now flowing in harmony with Kieran's shadow magic to create defensive barriers that protected every wolf in the warehouse. But I'm not ordinary, am I? I'm what supernatural communities were meant to become before your council decided that power was too dangerous to be allowed. The remaining guardians attacked in coordinated formation, their blessed weapons glowing with runic power designed specifically to disrupt mate bond magic. But Luna and Kieran moved together like two parts of a single organism, their combined abilities creating something entirely new in the supernatural world. Where Luna's silver fire met Kieran's shadow magic, reality itself seemed to bend. Weapons dissolved into harmless light. Mystical compulsions became gentle suggestions. The very air in the warehouse took on a quality that made every wolf present feel stronger, faster, more connected to their fundamental nature. This is what the original Moon Goddess pack could do, Elena Moreau said in wonder, her enhanced senses cataloging power that existed in only the oldest legends. Not just individual magic, but collaborative reality shaping. No wonder the council wanted them eliminated. One guardian managed to break through their defenses, his blessed crossbow aimed directly at the point where Luna and Kieran's joined hands rested against each other's hearts. The bolt flew with deadly accuracy, designed to sever not just their mate bond but their lives as well. Luna felt time slow as her power reached its absolute peak. She could see the bolt's trajectory, could calculate exactly where it would strike, could even sense the runic magic designed to prevent healing or resurrection. In that crystalline moment of perfect clarity, she understood something fundamental about her bloodline that changed everything. The Moon Goddess descendants weren't meant to fight. They were meant to transform. Silver fire exploded outward from her in a wave of pure transmutation magic. The crossbow bolt became a silver dove that spread its wings and dissolved into gentle light. The Guardians' weapons became flowering vines that wrapped around their arms without harm. Even Victoria's mystical aura shifted, the artificial enhancements that marked her as a council member fading to reveal the natural witch power underneath. "What did you do?" Victoria demanded, staring at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. "I removed the council's mystical modifications from your personal aura," Luna said calmly, though she could feel the tremendous energy cost of what she'd just accomplished. "You're still a powerful supernatural being, Victoria. You're just not artificially enhanced anymore." The revelation hit every person in the warehouse like a physical blow. If council members themselves were carrying mystical enhancements while suppressing everyone else's natural abilities, then the political implications were staggering. "How long?" Dmitry Volkov's voice was quiet, dangerous. "How long has the council been enhancing themselves while limiting everyone else?" Victoria's silence was answer enough. "Centuries," David Reeves said, his historian's training allowing him to piece together the broader pattern. The council didn't just eliminate the Moon Goddess bloodline to prevent power imbalances. They took that power for themselves and used it to maintain control over everyone else. That's... Kieran paused, his tactical mind working through the implications. "That's not governance. That's parasitism." Luna felt her mate bond with Kieran pulse as his understanding deepened. Through their connection, she could sense his growing anger, not just at the council's deception, but at the realization that his pack had been artificially weakened for their entire lives. "Show them," he said quietly. "Luna, show everyone what they're really capable of." "The cost," she started. "Will be worth it," he finished. "Whatever years of your life this magic takes, it will be worth it if supernatural communities finally understand what they've lost." Luna looked around the warehouse at wolves from 4 different packs, all of them stronger than they'd been in years, but still carrying the mystical suppressants that limited their true potential. She thought about Victoria's warnings about dependency and withdrawal, about the possibility that her power might ultimately harm the people she was trying to help. Then she thought about her grandmother's dying words. "The last daughter of the Moon Goddess line will either save all shifters or destroy them." "Not destroy," she whispered, understanding flooding through her. "Transform." She raised both hands, silver fire dancing between her fingers as she deliberately let her power build toward dangerous levels. This time, instead of targeting individual suppressants or specific mystical limitations, she reached for something much more ambitious: the Council's entire mystical control network. Luna's consciousness expanded beyond the warehouse, beyond Manhattan, following the mystical threads that connected every supernatural being in North America to the Council's governance structure. She could see it all now, a vast web of power suppression and artificial limitation that stretched from coast to coast, keeping werewolf packs, vampire covens, witch circles, and fae courts operating at maybe half their natural abilities. "Luna, don't," Victoria said, real fear creeping into her voice for the first time. "If you disrupt the control network all at once, the backlash could kill millions of supernatural beings. Their bodies won't be able to handle the sudden return of full power." "She's right," Marcus said urgently. "Luna, gradual change. Start with our pack, then expand slowly." "No," Luna said, her voice carrying absolute certainty. "Gradual change gives the Council time to adapt, time to create new suppressants, time to eliminate anyone who's been enhanced. It has to be all at once, or it doesn't work at all." "Then make it safe," Kieran said simply. "Luna, your power doesn't just remove limitations, it heals. Make the transition safe." Luna felt their mate bond pulse with shared understanding. He was right. Her silver fire wasn't just transmutation magic, it was healing magic. She could remove the Council's suppressants while simultaneously strengthening supernatural beings' ability to handle their true power levels. "Everyone hold hands," she said, gesturing for the wolves in the warehouse to form a circle around her and Kieran. "Pack bonds, territorial connections, whatever mystical links you have to other supernatural communities. I need to use those connections to spread the healing magic along with the liberation." "You're talking about the largest mystical working in supernatural history," Elena said quietly. "Luna, even with mate bond amplification, magic of that scale could kill you." "Then we better make sure it works the first time," Luna replied. The wolves in the warehouse moved without hesitation, forming concentric circles around Luna and Kieran while maintaining their pack bonds, territorial connections, and various mystical affiliations. Luna could feel the network of supernatural connections spreading out from their improvised ritual circle like ripples in a cosmic pond. "Victoria," she said, turning to the Council member who stood frozen between her powerless guardians. "Last chance. Join us voluntarily, or be transformed whether you want it or not." Victoria studied Luna's face, no doubt using every supernatural sense she possessed to assess the situation. What she saw there must have convinced her that resistance was futile, because she stepped forward with the grace of someone accepting inevitable change. "If you're wrong," Victoria said quietly, "if this kills millions of supernatural beings, then I'll spend whatever afterlife exists taking responsibility for it," Luna replied. "But if I'm right, if supernatural communities can handle their true power levels, then we're about to witness the most significant evolution in our world since the original mate bonds were created." She took Kieran's hands, feeling their mate bond flare to brilliant life, as their combined power prepared for the most ambitious magical working either of them had ever attempted. Around them, pack bonds hummed with shared determination, territorial connections crackled with accumulated energy, and the very air seemed to hold its breath. "Together," Kieran said, echoing the word that had become their shared promise. "Together," Luna agreed. She released every limitation she'd ever placed on her power, let her silver fire build to levels that would have terrified her hours earlier, and reached out through the supernatural network to touch every mystical suppression the Council had ever placed. And then, with surgical precision guided by centuries of genetic memory, she began to set her people free. The transformation started in the warehouse, spreading from wolf to wolf as Council suppressants dissolved like morning mist. But it didn't stop there. Through pack bonds and territorial connections, through mystical affiliations and supernatural bloodlines, Luna's healing magic raced across the continent faster than thought. In Boston, a vampire coven felt their true strength return for the first time in decades. In Chicago, a witch circle discovered that their ritual magic had been operating at maybe 30% of its natural potential. In Seattle, A Fae court realized that their glamour abilities were far more powerful than council limitations had allowed them to believe. And everywhere, supernatural beings who had spent their entire lives accepting artificial weakness suddenly understood exactly what they had lost. My God, Victoria breathed, her own natural power level stabilizing as the healing magic reached her. What have we done? What should have been done centuries ago? Luna replied, though she could feel the tremendous energy cost of the working draining years from her life with each passing second. We've given supernatural communities the choice to be what they were always meant to be. Through her expanded consciousness, she could sense the reactions spreading across North America like wildfire. Some supernatural beings were frightened by their returned power, seeking council guidance for managing abilities they'd never been allowed to develop. Others were angry, demanding explanations for decades or centuries of artificial limitation. But most, Luna realized with growing wonder, were simply grateful. Grateful to finally feel complete. Grateful to discover that their struggles and limitations hadn't been personal failures, but systemic suppression. Grateful to know that they were capable of so much more than they'd ever been allowed to dream. It's working, Kieran said, his voice filled with awe as he felt the transformation through their mate bond. Luna, it's actually working. Supernatural communities aren't collapsing, they're flourishing. Luna smiled, though she could feel her life force draining away with each supernatural being the healing magic touched. The cost of freeing an entire continent's worth of supernatural communities was higher than she'd anticipated, but watching wolves stand straighter, feeling vampires move with renewed grace, sensing witches whose magic finally matched their potential, it was worth every year she was trading. How many? She asked quietly, knowing Kieran would understand what she meant. Maybe 30 years, he said, his voice tight with the pain of their shared connection. Luna, you're burning through your life force too quickly. Pull back, let the network complete the transformation on its own momentum. Can't, she gasped, silver fire now wreathing her entire body as the magical working reached its peak intensity. Have to make sure everyone transitions safely. Have to make sure the healing magic reaches all of them. Through their mate bond, she could feel Kieran's desperation as he realized what she was planning. Not just the removal of council suppressants, but a permanent transformation that would make supernatural communities immune to mystical limitation forever. Luna, no, he said urgently. There has to be another way. There is, she said, meeting his golden eyes with absolute love and determination. You. Before he could ask what she meant, Luna opened their mate bond completely, sharing not just her power, but the cost of the magical working itself. Instead of her life force alone fueling the transformation, their combined strength became the foundation for something unprecedented in supernatural history. A mate bond so powerful it could reshape reality itself. Silver fire and shadow magic wove together in patterns that made the warehouse's foundations hum with harmonic frequencies. Their shared power reached out through the supernatural network with surgical precision, not just removing limitations, but rewriting the fundamental magical laws that governed supernatural abilities. When the working finally completed, every supernatural being in North America carried a permanent immunity to mystical suppression. No council edict, no governmental restriction, no artificial limitation could ever reduce their power below its natural level again. And at the center of it all, Luna and Kieran stood transformed, no longer just werewolf mates, but the first alpha pair in centuries, their combined abilities creating a new form of supernatural leadership that would guide communities through the changes ahead. Luna collapsed as the magical working completed, her body finally succumbing to the tremendous energy cost of reshaping continental-scale mystical law. But instead of the hollow exhaustion she'd expected, she felt complete. The mate bond between them hadn't just shared the cost of the magic, it had fundamentally altered how her moon goddess abilities functioned. The wolves in the warehouse moved without hesitation, forming concentric circles around Luna and Kieran while maintaining their pack bonds, territorial connections, and various mystical affiliations. Luna could feel the network of supernatural connections spreading out from their improvised ritual circle like ripples in a cosmic pond. Victoria, she said, turning to the council member who stood frozen between her powerless guardians. Last chance. Join us voluntarily, or be transformed whether you want it or not. Victoria studied Luna's face, no doubt using every supernatural sense she possessed to assess the situation. What she saw there must have convinced her that resistance was futile, because she stepped forward with the grace of someone accepting inevitable change. If you're wrong, Victoria said quietly, if this kills millions of supernatural beings, then I'll spend whatever afterlife exists taking responsibility for it, Luna replied. But if I'm right, if supernatural communities can handle their true power levels, then we're about to witness the most significant evolution in our world since the original mate bonds were created. She took Kieran's hands, feeling their mate bond flare to brilliant life, as their combined power prepared for the most ambitious magical working either of them had ever attempted. Around them, pack bonds hummed with shared determination, territorial connections crackled with accumulated energy, and the very air seemed to hold its breath. Together, Kieran said, echoing the word that had become their shared promise. Together, Luna agreed. She released every limitation she'd ever placed on her power, let her silver fire build to levels that would have terrified her hours earlier, and reached out through the supernatural network to touch every mystical suppression the Council had ever placed. And then, with surgical precision guided by centuries of genetic memory, she began to set her people free. The transformation started in the warehouse, spreading from wolf to wolf as council suppressants dissolved like morning mist. But it didn't stop there. Through pack bonds and territorial connections, through mystical affiliations and supernatural bloodlines, Luna's healing magic raced across the continent faster than thought. In Boston, a vampire coven felt their true strength return for the first time in decades. In Chicago, a witch circle discovered that their ritual magic had been operating at maybe 30% of its natural potential. In Seattle, a fae court realized that their glamour abilities were far more powerful than council limitations had allowed them to believe. And everywhere, supernatural beings who had spent their entire lives accepting artificial weakness suddenly understood exactly what they had lost. My God, Victoria breathed, her own natural power level stabilizing as the healing magic reached her. What have we done? What should have been done centuries ago? Luna replied, though she could feel the tremendous energy cost of the working draining years from her life with each passing second. We've given supernatural communities the choice to be what they were always meant to be. Through her expanded consciousness, she could sense the reaction spreading across North America like wildfire. Some supernatural beings were frightened by their returned power, seeking council guidance for managing abilities they'd never been allowed to develop. Others were angry, demanding explanations for decades or centuries of artificial limitation. But most, Luna realized with growing wonder, were simply grateful. Grateful to finally feel complete. Grateful to discover that their struggles and limitations hadn't been personal failures, but systemic suppression. Grateful to know that they were capable of so much more than they'd ever been allowed to dream. It's working, Kieran said, his voice filled with awe as he felt the transformation through their mate bond. Luna, it's actually working. Supernatural communities aren't collapsing, they're flourishing. Luna smiled, though she could feel her life force draining away with each supernatural being the healing magic touched. The cost of freeing an entire continent's worth of supernatural communities was higher than she'd anticipated, but watching wolves stand straighter, feeling vampires move with renewed grace, sensing witches whose magic finally matched their potential, it was worth every year she was trading. How many? She asked quietly, knowing Kieran would understand what she meant. Maybe 30 years, he said, his voice tight with the pain of their shared connection. Luna, you're burning through your life force too quickly. Pull back, let the network complete the transformation on its own momentum. Can't, she gasped, silver fire now wreathing her entire body as the magical working reached its peak intensity. Have to make sure everyone transitions safely. Have to make sure the healing magic reaches all of them. Through their mate bond, she could feel Kieran's desperation as he realized what she was planning. Not just the removal of council suppressants, but a permanent transformation that would make supernatural communities immune to mystical limitation forever. "Luna, no," he said urgently. "There has to be another way." "There is," she said, meeting his golden eyes with absolute love and determination. "You." Before he could ask what she meant, Luna opened their mate bond completely, sharing not just her power, but the cost of the magical working itself. Instead of her life force alone fueling the transformation, their combined strength became the foundation for something unprecedented in supernatural history. A mate bond so powerful it could reshape reality itself. Silver fire and shadow magic wove together in patterns that made the warehouse's foundations hum with harmonic frequencies. Their shared power reached out through the supernatural network with surgical precision, not just removing limitations, but rewriting the fundamental magical laws that governed supernatural abilities. When the working finally completed, every supernatural being in North America carried a permanent immunity to mystical suppression. No council edict, no governmental restriction, no artificial limitation could ever reduce their power below its natural level again. And at the center of it all, Luna and Kieran stood transformed, no longer just werewolf mates, but the first alpha pair in centuries, their combined abilities creating a new form of supernatural leadership that would guide communities through the changes ahead. Luna collapsed as the magical working completed, her body finally succumbing to the tremendous energy cost of reshaping continental-scale mystical law. But instead of the hollow exhaustion she'd expected, she felt complete. The mate bond between them hadn't just shared the cost of the magic, it had fundamentally altered how her moon goddess abilities functioned. "The curse," she whispered, understanding flooding through her. "Kieran, the bloodline curse is gone." "How?" he asked, though his enhanced senses were already confirming what she said. The mystical signature that had marked her as dangerous to any male who loved her had vanished completely. "Because it was never really a curse," she said, letting him help her to her feet as supernatural beings throughout the warehouse stared at them with expressions ranging from awe to terror. "It was a safeguard. My ancestors designed the bloodline magic to remain dormant until it found a mate strong enough to share the burden of that much power safely." Victoria stepped forward, her own natural abilities stabilizing as the Council's mystical modifications continued to fade from her system. "You're saying the moon goddess descendants weren't cursed? They were waiting?" "Waiting for the right evolutionary moment," Luna confirmed. "When supernatural communities were ready for the next stage of development, when the restrictions had become so limiting that total transformation was the only option for survival." Around them, the warehouse hummed with enhanced pack bonds and supernatural energies that felt more stable and powerful than anything Luna had ever experienced. Through the mystical network they'd created, she could sense similar transformations happening across the continent as supernatural communities discovered their true potential. "This changes everything," Elena said quietly. "Not just for werewolves, but for every supernatural being in existence." The Council's authority was based on communities needing their protection and guidance. "If we're all operating at full power, then we don't need protection," Dimitri finished. "We need cooperation.
Partnership.
The kind of leadership that strengthens communities instead of limiting them." Luna felt Kieran's hand tighten around hers as the implications sank in. They hadn't just freed supernatural communities from council limitations, they'd fundamentally altered the political structure of their entire world. "The council won't accept this," Victoria said, though her voice held resignation rather than threat. "Even without mystical enhancements, they have centuries of political influence, military resources, legal frameworks, all of which become irrelevant when the communities they're trying to control no longer need them," Marcus interrupted. "Victoria, how long do you think council authority will last when every supernatural being realizes they've been artificially weakened for decades?" Through the mystical network, Luna could already sense the answer. Across North America, supernatural communities were demanding explanations, forming new alliances, establishing governance structures based on cooperation rather than hierarchical control. The Council's political power was dissolving as quickly as their mystical authority had. "What happens now?" Sarah Chen asked, her enforcer's instincts focused on practical concerns. We've basically declared independence from supernatural law. The council has human government connections, military contracts. They're not going to just accept this transformation. Then we make sure they don't have a choice, Kieran said quietly. Luna, how quickly can your healing magic spread beyond North America? Luna closed her eyes, extending her consciousness through the mystical network they'd created. She could feel supernatural communities across the globe, most of them still carrying council limitations, still operating at artificial power levels.
6 hours, she said.
Maybe 8. But Kieran, magic of that scale, even with our mate bond sharing the cost. We'll survive it, he said with absolute certainty. And when we're done, every supernatural being on the planet will be free from artificial limitations. The council won't be able to maintain authority over anyone. Global revolution, Elena breathed. You're talking about overthrowing supernatural governance worldwide. We're talking about evolution, Luna corrected. About supernatural communities finally becoming what they were always meant to be. Victoria moved closer, her political instincts apparently adapting to the new reality with remarkable speed. If you're really going to do this, if you're going to free every supernatural community on Earth, you'll need inside information about council operations, global communication networks, military resources, the locations of major suppression nodes. You're offering to help? Marcus asked suspiciously. I'm offering to adapt, Victoria replied. The old system is dying whether I help or not. I'd rather be part of building something new than clinging to something that no longer serves our communities. Luna studied the council member's face, her enhanced senses picking up sincerity mixed with pragmatic calculation. Victoria wasn't offering help out of altruism. She was positioning herself to have influence in whatever supernatural government emerged from the chaos. What do you want in exchange? Luna asked directly. A seat at the table when new governance structures are established, Victoria said honestly. I've spent 2 centuries learning how supernatural politics work. That knowledge could be useful for communities trying to organize themselves without council framework. Or it could be useful for recreating the same problems with different people in charge, Kieran pointed out. Which is why the new structures need to be fundamentally different, Luna said, an idea beginning to form in her mind. Not hierarchical governance based on control, but networked cooperation based on mutual support. She gestured to the wolves still holding hands in concentric circles around them, their pack bonds creating a web of connection that strengthened everyone involved without limiting individual autonomy. Like this, she continued. Multiple communities connected through voluntary bonds, sharing resources and support without anyone having ultimate authority over anyone else. Anarchism with supernatural characteristics, Elena said thoughtfully. It could work, especially if communities are operating at full power and don't need external protection. It will work, Luna said with growing confidence. Because it's how supernatural communities organized themselves before the council existed. We're not creating something new, we're returning to something older and more stable. Through their mate bond, she could feel Kieran's agreement and excitement as he realized what she was proposing. Not just the elimination of council control, but the creation of an entirely new form of supernatural society based on cooperation rather than domination. The global transformation, he said. When we remove limitations worldwide, we simultaneously offer every community the choice to join voluntary networks instead of remaining isolated. And those networks become strong enough to resist any attempt to reimpose centralized control, Luna finished. Victoria smiled, her political instincts recognizing elegant strategy when she saw it. Brilliant. You're not just overthrowing the council, you're making their entire approach to governance obsolete. Around them, the warehouse buzzed with excited conversation as wolves from multiple packs began discussing the practical implications of global supernatural revolution. Through the mystical network, Luna could sense similar conversations happening in supernatural communities across North America as the reality of their new freedom sank in. When do we start? Elena asked. Luna looked at Kieran, feeling their mate bond pulse with shared determination and love so deep it made her silver fire dance with joy. Now, she said simply. She raised her hands again, silver fire building between her fingers as Kieran's shadow magic swirled around them both. But this time, instead of continental transformation, they were preparing for something unprecedented in supernatural history. The liberation of every supernatural being on Earth. Everyone stay connected, Luna called out to the wolves maintaining their circle. This one's going to be big. Through the mystical network, supernatural communities across the globe began to sense something approaching, a wave of transformation that would free them from limitations they'd carried for so long they'd forgotten what natural power felt like. The age of supernatural independence was about to begin. The global transformation took 18 hours to complete, and by the time it was finished, Luna felt like she'd lived several lifetimes in a single day. The mystical working had required not just her own power and Kieran's, but active participation from supernatural communities worldwide as her healing magic reached them. Werewolf packs in Scotland, vampire courts in Romania, witch covens in New Zealand, all of them had to consciously accept the removal of council limitations for the transformation to work safely. To Luna's amazement, less than 3% had refused. "It's over," she said quietly, settling into Kieran's arms as dawn light filtered through the warehouse's reinforced windows. Around them, wolves from multiple packs were finally resting after maintaining the mystical circle for nearly a full day. Every supernatural being on Earth now has immunity to mystical suppression. The Council can't reimpose limitations even if they wanted to. And do they want to? Kieran asked, though his enhanced senses were already picking up the answer through news feeds, social media, and the mystical communication networks that had sprung up as supernatural communities discovered their enhanced abilities. "The Council is fragmenting," Victoria reported, consulting a device that looked like a tablet crossed with a crystal ball. "About half the members are trying to maintain authority through traditional political channels. The other half are attempting to adapt to the new reality by offering cooperation instead of control." And the supernatural communities themselves? Forming voluntary networks exactly as Luna predicted, Elena said with something like wonder in her voice. "Pack alliances, coven cooperatives, court confederations, all based on mutual support rather than hierarchical authority. It's the most rapid political reorganization in supernatural history." Luna felt a deep sense of satisfaction through her mate bond with Kieran. The transformation hadn't just freed supernatural communities from artificial limitations, it had awakened dormant instincts for cooperation and mutual aid that had been suppressed along with individual abilities. "There's something else," Marcus said, his beta instincts focused on practical concerns. "Luna, your power isn't fading. If anything, it's getting stronger." Luna looked down at her hands, surprised to see silver fire still dancing between her fingers despite the tremendous energy expenditure of the global working. "That's impossible. Magic of that scale should have drained me completely." "Unless," Kieran said thoughtfully, "the mate bond amplification effect is permanent." "Luna, what if sharing the cost of the transformation didn't just protect you from the energy drain? What if it fundamentally changed how your power works?" She closed her eyes, extending her consciousness to examine her own mystical signature. What she found there made her gasp in surprise. "I'm not carrying moon goddess magic anymore," she said wonderingly. "We are. The bloodline power has been distributed through our mate bond, shared equally between us." "Which means?" Victoria asked, her political instincts recognizing the importance of understanding exactly what kind of power Luna and Kieran now possessed. "Which means," Kieran said, his shadow magic beginning to resonate with Luna's silver fire in patterns they'd never achieved before, "that we're not just the first alpha pair in centuries. We're the first permanently bonded supernatural leaders in history." The implications were staggering. Traditional alpha leadership was based on individual dominance backed by pack consent. But Luna and Kieran had created something entirely new, joint leadership based on shared power and mutual enhancement. "Show us," Elena said quietly. "If you're really operating as a permanently bonded pair, show us what that looks like." Luna and Kieran exchanged a glance, their mate bond carrying wordless communication faster than thought. Then, moving as one organism, they stood and raised their joined hands. Silver fire and shadow magic wove together in patterns that made reality itself seem more solid, more vibrant, more fundamentally stable. The warehouse's protective wards didn't just strengthen, they evolved, becoming something that could adapt to threats rather than simply resisting them. The pack bonds connecting every wolf in the building didn't just grow more powerful, they became more sophisticated, allowing for complex emotional and tactical communication that had never been possible before. But most remarkably, every supernatural being in the building felt their own abilities continue to grow. Not artificial enhancement, but natural evolution guided by proximity to power that was designed to strengthen communities rather than individuals. My God, David Reeves breathed. You're not just leaders, you're catalysts. Your very presence makes supernatural communities more than they could be alone. That's what the original Moon Goddess Pack was meant to become, Luna realized. Not rulers imposing their will, but partners helping others achieve their full potential. And that's why the Council was so afraid of your bloodline, Victoria added. Not because your power was destructive, but because it made centralized authority irrelevant. Why follow distant leaders when you have local catalysts helping your community flourish? Through the mystical network they'd created, Luna could sense similar realizations happening in supernatural communities worldwide. The transformation hadn't just freed them from council limitations, it had awakened their understanding of what leadership could be when it was based on service rather than dominance. What happens now? Sarah Chen asked. We've fundamentally altered supernatural society, but humans still don't know we exist. How do we maintain the secrecy that's protected us for centuries? Do we want to? Marcus asked quietly. Supernatural communities at full power, organized through voluntary cooperation networks, we might be strong enough now to safely coexist with humans rather than hiding from them. The question hung in the warehouse air like a challenge. For centuries, supernatural secrecy had been the foundation of their survival. But supernatural communities operating at natural power levels, allied through mutual support rather than weakened by artificial limitations, might indeed be strong enough for a different approach. That's a decision for individual communities to make, Luna said firmly. The whole point of eliminating centralized authority is that we don't impose universal policies anymore. Some communities will choose continued secrecy, others will choose gradual revelation, still others will choose full integration. All of those approaches can coexist. As long as they're supported by strong enough networks to handle whatever challenges arise, Kieran added. Which brings us to the practical question, Elena said with a slight smile. Luna, Kieran, what exactly are you planning to do with your new status as the first permanently bonded alpha pair? Because every supernatural community on the planet is going to want guidance for navigating these changes. Luna felt a flutter of panic at the thought of becoming a central authority figure for global supernatural society. That was exactly the kind of hierarchical leadership they'd just overthrown. We're not going to rule anything, she said quickly. That's not what this power is for. But you could help, Victoria said thoughtfully. Not as rulers, but as consultants? Mediators? Communities facing challenges could request your assistance, and your catalyst abilities could help them find solutions they couldn't achieve alone. Traveling advisors, Marcus said, warming to the idea. Moving from community to community, helping establish voluntary networks, sharing techniques for cooperative governance. Like the old pack shamans, David interrupted excitedly. Before centralized authority, werewolf communities had traveling wise pairs who helped resolve conflicts and strengthen pack bonds. Luna and Kieran could revive that tradition on a global scale. Luna looked at Kieran, feeling their mate bond pulse with shared excitement as they realized what their friends were suggesting. Not leadership in the traditional sense, but partnership with communities worldwide as they explored their new freedom. We'd never stay in one place long enough to accumulate political power, she said thoughtfully. Never establish permanent authority over anyone. Just help communities become stronger versions of themselves. And each other, Kieran added, his shadow magic weaving through her silver fire in patterns that spoke of endless possibilities. Luna, we'd be traveling together, working together, growing together, using our bond to help other supernatural beings discover what they're really capable of. The perfect use for catalyst abilities, Elena agreed. Power that strengthens others rather than dominating them. Around them, the warehouse hummed with approval as wolves from multiple packs recognized the elegance of the solution. Luna and Kieran would become what their power was designed for, not rulers, but servants of supernatural communities worldwide. There's just one problem, Victoria said quietly. The remnants of the council that are trying to maintain traditional authority through political channels, they're not going to accept being ignored. If you start traveling openly, helping communities establish independence, you'll become targets for assassination. Let them try, Dimitri said grimly. Supernatural communities at full power, organized through voluntary networks, protected by traveling catalysts who can enhance their abilities? The council's old methods won't work anymore. And their new methods? Luna asked. Victoria's expression grew troubled. That's what worries me. The council members who are refusing to adapt, they're reaching out to human government contacts, military organizations, groups that have always suspected supernatural existence. If they can't maintain control through mystical authority, they might try to expose and eliminate supernatural communities entirely. The warehouse fell silent as the implications sank in. The transformation that had freed supernatural communities from artificial limitations might have also made them targets for systematic extermination. Then we make sure they can't, Luna said quietly, her silver fire beginning to pulse with dangerous intensity. Victoria, those council members who are working with human authorities, how much do they know about individual communities? Locations, populations, defensive capabilities? Everything, Victoria admitted. 2 centuries of governance records, census data, territorial maps, they have complete intelligence on every supernatural community in existence. Not anymore they don't, Kieran said, his shadow magic beginning to weave through Luna's power in patterns that spoke of surgical precision. Luna, if we can reach the council's data repositories, we can erase every record they've ever kept about supernatural communities, she finished, understanding flooding through their mate bond. Leave the communities themselves protected by anonymity while they establish new networks. That's a massive mystical working, Marcus said cautiously. Even with your enhanced abilities, targeting information rather than people or objects is exactly what moon goddess magic was designed for, Luna interrupted. My ancestors didn't just create mate bonds, they created the mystical frameworks that allowed supernatural communities to exist hidden within human society. Information manipulation was one of their core abilities. She stood, silver fire now wreathing her entire body as her power responded to the challenge ahead. How long do we have before the rogue council members finish organizing human opposition? Days, Victoria said grimly. Maybe hours. They're moving fast, using existing military connections and government contacts to establish supernatural hunting protocols. Then we move faster, Kieran said, his shadow magic beginning to resonate with Luna's power as their mate bond prepared for the most precise mystical working either of them had ever attempted. Around them, wolves from multiple packs began forming the mystical circle that had become their trademark, pack bonds and territorial connections creating the network they'd need to target council data repositories worldwide. Together? Kieran asked, echoing the word that had become their shared promise. Together, Luna agreed, raising her hands as silver fire danced between her fingers. They had hours to save every supernatural community on Earth from systematic extermination. And for the first time since this all began, Luna felt completely confident that they would succeed. The age of supernatural independence was about to be protected by the most elegant act of mystical vandalism in history. The Council's primary data repository was buried 300 feet beneath the Swiss Alps, protected by mystical wards that had been accumulating power for over 2 centuries. Under normal circumstances, it would have been absolutely impregnable. But Luna and Kieran were no longer operating under normal circumstances. There, Luna said, her consciousness expanded through the mystical network until she could perceive the repository like a dark star in the web of supernatural information that connected communities worldwide. It's not just data storage, it's a mystical anchor. The Council has been using those records to maintain psychological and emotional control over supernatural communities.
How?
Kieran asked, though his shadow magic was already beginning to probe the repository's defenses through their shared power. Guilt, fear, dependency, Luna replied, her silver fire dancing through the mystical connections like liquid starlight. Every time a supernatural being registered with the council, submitted to their authority, accepted their limitations, those actions created mystical bonds that reinforced the power imbalance. Through their mate bond, Kieran felt her growing understanding of exactly how sophisticated the council's control system had been. Not just mystical suppression, but psychological conditioning backed by centuries of accumulated consent. So, destroying the records doesn't just eliminate intelligence about supernatural communities, he realized. It breaks the mystical bonds that made those communities psychologically dependent on council authority. Exactly, Luna said, her power building toward dangerous levels as she prepared for the most complex mystical working she'd ever attempted. And once those bonds are severed, supernatural communities will be truly free to choose their own governance structures. Around them in the warehouse, wolves from 6 different packs now maintained the mystical circle that had become the foundation for all their large-scale workings. But this time, they weren't alone. Through the voluntary networks that had been forming since the global transformation, supernatural communities worldwide were offering their power to support the working. I'm detecting over 10,000 individual contributors, Marcus reported, his beta instincts focused on the tactical aspects of coordinating so many different magical signatures. Werewolf packs, vampire courts, witch covens, fey circles. Luna, you're not just drawing on your own power anymore. You're conducting a global orchestra of supernatural abilities. Luna felt tears on her cheeks as she realized what her friends were telling her. The voluntary networks they'd helped create weren't just political structures. They were mystical collaboratives that allowed supernatural communities to share power for mutual benefit. The original moon goddess vision, she whispered. Not individual bloodlines hoarding power, but entire communities working together to achieve what none of them could accomplish alone. And that, Victoria said quietly, is what the council was really afraid of. Not your individual abilities, but your potential to catalyze collaborative magic on a global scale. Through their expanded consciousness, Luna and Kieran could sense the council's repository like a wound in the mystical fabric of their world. Centuries of suppression, control, and artificial limitation had created a concentration of negative energy so dense it was actively draining power from every supernatural being on the planet. It's not just a data storage facility, Kieran said grimly. It's a mystical parasite. The council has been literally feeding off supernatural communities' natural power for over 200 years. Which is why eliminating it will do more than just protect individual communities from exposure, Luna added. Destroying the repository will return centuries of stolen power to where it belongs. The implications were staggering. Every supernatural being on Earth was about to experience not just freedom from artificial limitations, but the return of power that had been systematically drained from their communities for generations. Are we ready for that? Elena asked, her alpha instincts recognizing the magnitude of what they were about to unleash. Supernatural communities that are already operating at enhanced levels suddenly receiving massive power returns? They'll be fine, Luna said with absolute certainty. The voluntary networks we've helped establish are designed to distribute and stabilize power rather than concentrating it. Instead of individuals becoming dangerously overpowered, entire communities will become stronger together. Luna, Sarah Chin said urgently, Victoria's monitoring equipment is showing massive council activity. They're mobilizing everything, human military contacts, government connections, even some supernatural communities that are still loyal to traditional authority. How long do we have? Kieran asked. Minutes, Victoria replied grimly. Maybe less. The rogue council members are about to trigger systematic supernatural exposure and elimination protocols. If we're going to act, it has to be now. Luna raised her hands, silver fire building between her fingers as thousands of supernatural contributors worldwide offered their power to the working. Through the mystical network, she could feel werewolf packs in Canada, vampire courts in Eastern Europe, witch covens in Australia, fey circles in Ireland, all of them adding their abilities to hers in an unprecedented display of cooperative magic. "Kieran," she said quietly, "whatever happens next, I need you to know that these have been the best hours of my life. Finding you again, discovering what we could be together, helping supernatural communities claim their freedom." "We're not done yet," he interrupted, his shadow magic beginning to weave through her silver fire in patterns that spoke of absolute partnership. "Luna, we're going to succeed. We're going to protect every supernatural community on Earth. And then we're going to spend the rest of our very long lives traveling the world, helping others discover what they're capable of." Their mate bond pulsed with shared determination and love so deep it made the warehouse's foundations hum with harmonic frequencies. Around them, the mystical circle expanded as more supernatural beings joined the working through voluntary network connections. "Now," Luna said simply. Their combined power exploded outward, not in a wave of destruction but in a precision strike that targeted every mystical bond the Council had ever used to control supernatural communities. Across the globe, centuries of accumulated records simply vanished. Not destroyed in a way that left traces, but transmuted into harmless energy that returned to the communities the Council had been draining. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Every supernatural being on Earth felt a sudden surge of returned power, not foreign energy, but their own abilities finally operating without artificial interference. Pack bonds strengthened beyond anything in recorded history. Territorial wards became so stable they could probably last millennia without maintenance. Individual abilities reached levels that had existed only in the oldest legends. But instead of chaos or dangerous power spikes, the voluntary networks Luna and Kieran had helped establish distributed and stabilized the returned energy. Communities became stronger together, individuals became more capable within supportive frameworks, and the entire supernatural world achieved a level of integration and cooperation that had never existed before. "It's done," Luna said, settling back into Kieran's arms as the mystical working completed. "Every record, every mystical bond, every tool of control the Council ever used, all of it is gone. Supernatural communities are truly free now." "And the rogue Council members?" Marcus asked. "No longer have any information to share with human authorities," Victoria reported, consulting her monitoring devices with something like wonder. "They're still trying to trigger exposure protocols, but they can't tell human governments where to find supernatural communities, how to identify them, or what their capabilities are. Because that information no longer exists anywhere," Elena said with deep satisfaction. "Luna, Kieran, you've not only freed supernatural communities from artificial control, you've protected them from systematic persecution." Through the mystical network, they could sense supernatural communities worldwide celebrating their newfound freedom and returned power. But more importantly, they could sense the voluntary networks strengthening, communities choosing cooperation over isolation, shared power over individual dominance. "What happens now?" David asked. Luna looked at Kieran, feeling their mate bond pulse with shared excitement and anticipation for the future they would build together. "Now," she said, "we start traveling. There are supernatural communities all over the world who are just beginning to explore their true potential. They're going to need guides, mediators, catalysts to help them discover what they're really capable of." "Partners," Kieran added, his shadow magic dancing through her silver fire in patterns that spoke of endless possibilities. "Not rulers or authorities, but collaborators in building a supernatural world based on mutual support rather than hierarchical control." "The first permanently bonded alpha pair in history," Marcus said with deep pride. "Using their power to serve communities rather than dominate them." "The way it was always meant to be," Luna agreed. Around them, the warehouse hummed with approval and anticipation as supernatural beings from multiple communities prepared to establish new forms of cooperation and mutual aid. The age of artificial limitation was over. The age of voluntary collaboration had begun. And at the center of it all, Luna and Kieran stood hand in hand, their mate bond stronger than ever, ready to spend their lives helping others discover what they could become when they were finally free to be themselves. The real adventure was just beginning. 6 months after the global transformation, Luna and Kieran stood on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of silver and gold that matched their intertwined magic. They had just finished their third international mediation, helping a Confederation of Supernatural Communities in Northern California establish sustainable cooperation agreements. The Redwood Alliance is going to be incredible, Luna said, her silver fire dancing in harmony with the evening breeze. 5 different species, 12 communities, all working together to protect both their territories and the human environment around them. And they're using governance structures based on consensus and mutual aid rather than hierarchy, Kieran added, his shadow magic creating patterns in the gathering darkness that spoke of deep satisfaction. It's exactly what we hoped would happen when communities were free to organize themselves. Through their mate bond, they shared a moment of quiet pride in how far supernatural society had evolved. The voluntary networks they'd helped establish during the liberation had grown into sophisticated cooperative systems that spanned continents. Supernatural communities worldwide were not only stronger than they'd ever been, they were kinder, more creative, more willing to experiment with new forms of social organization. The council remnants? Luna asked, though she already knew the answer through their mystical connection to the global networks. Still trying to establish human government contacts, but failing completely, Kieran replied. Without intelligence about supernatural communities, without mystical control mechanisms, and without the artificial dependency they spent centuries creating, they're just isolated individuals shouting warnings that no one believes. And the communities that were initially loyal to traditional authority? Most of them have joined voluntary networks within the past month, Kieran said with a smile. It turns out that when you give supernatural beings a choice between artificial limitation and natural freedom, they choose freedom every time. Luna felt a warm glow of satisfaction through their bond. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Some communities had struggled to adapt to self-governance. Others had initially hoarded their returned power instead of sharing it. But the voluntary networks had proven remarkably effective at providing support for struggling groups while maintaining respect for individual community autonomy. Where to next? She asked, though their shared consciousness was already reviewing requests for assistance that had come through the mystical network during their current mediation. The Amazon Confederation wants help establishing trade agreements with urban communities, Kieran said, his tactical mind organizing their options. The Scandinavian circles are requesting mediation for territorial disputes that predate the Council by centuries. And there's a new cooperative in Antarctica that's trying to establish the first interspecies research station. Antarctica sounds fascinating, Luna said immediately. Supernatural beings working together on scientific research, sharing knowledge across species lines. Without any traditional authority structures, because there's no established territorial hierarchy, Kieran finished. It could be a perfect laboratory for testing new forms of cooperative organization. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the last light fade from the western sky, while their mystical senses picked up the healthy energy signatures of supernatural communities throughout the region. The Redwood Alliance was already stronger and more stable than most traditional pack territories, despite having been formed only months earlier. Luna, Kieran said quietly, do you ever regret it? Giving up a normal mate bond for this? Luna turned to study his face in the gathering darkness, her enhanced senses picking up the complex mixture of satisfaction and uncertainty in his emotional signature. Through their bond, she could feel what he was really asking, whether she missed the possibility of a quiet life, children, the kind of domestic happiness that other mated pairs enjoyed. Never, she said firmly, taking his hands and letting her silver fire dance between their joined fingers. Kieran, we have something no other supernatural couple in history has ever had. Not just a mate bond, but a partnership that makes communities stronger just by existing. We're helping build a world where supernatural beings can be everything they were meant to be. But we're always traveling, always working, always serving others instead of building something for ourselves, he pointed out. We are building something for ourselves, Luna corrected. Every community we help establish, every network we strengthen, every conflict we mediate, that's our family, Kieran. Not just the Nightshade Pack, but thousands of supernatural communities worldwide who are part of our extended family through the voluntary networks. She gestured toward the forest below them, where they could sense the content energy signatures of the Redwood Alliance members settling in for the night. The Werewolf Pack that's teaching vampire courts about sustainable forestry. The Witch Coven that's sharing healing magic with Fae circles. The communities that are choosing cooperation over competition because they've seen what we can accomplish together. That's our legacy. That's our contribution to the world. Kieran's expression softened as he felt the absolute sincerity of her words through their mate bond. You really mean that? I really do, Luna confirmed. Besides, who says we can't have both? She pulled him closer, her silver fire beginning to weave through his shadow magic and patterns that spoke of deep intimacy and shared dreams. The voluntary networks are stable enough now that they don't need constant mediation. Communities worldwide have learned to resolve most conflicts through direct cooperation. Maybe it's time for the first permanently bonded alpha pair to take some time for themselves. What did you have in mind? Kieran asked, though his enhanced senses were already picking up the subtle shift in her emotional signature that suggested she'd been thinking about this for a while. A year, Luna said, her voice taking on the dreamy quality that marked her deepest hopes. 12 months to travel not as mediators or catalysts, but as mates exploring the world together. Seeing what supernatural communities have built when they're free to follow their own visions. Learning what we want our permanent base to look like when we're ready to establish one. And maybe, Kieran said slowly, understanding flooding through their bond, exploring what it means to be a mated pair when we're not constantly focused on serving others. Maybe, Luna agreed, her silver fire pulsing with anticipation. Through their mystical connection to the global networks, they could sense supernatural communities worldwide thriving in ways that would have been impossible under council authority. Not just surviving but flourishing. Creating art, developing new technologies, establishing educational systems, exploring forms of social organization that prioritized individual flourishing within strong communities. The networks won't collapse if we step back for a year? Kieran asked, his alpha instincts needing reassurance that their responsibilities would be handled. They're designed to be resilient and self-governing, Luna reminded him. And Marcus has been doing an incredible job coordinating with other voluntary network leaders. The Nightshade Pact territory has become a major hub for intercommunity cooperation. True, Kieran admitted. And Elena's Crescent Moon Alliance has established those traveling mediation teams that can handle most conflicts without us. Plus, Victoria's Council Transition Project has successfully converted most remaining traditional authority structures into cooperative governance systems, Luna added. The supernatural world has learned to function without central authority figures. So we're not abandoning our responsibilities, Kieran said, his tactical mind working through the implications. We're trusting the communities we've helped establish to continue growing and thriving on their own. Exactly, Luna confirmed. And when we come back from our year of exploration, we'll have new perspectives on how to serve supernatural communities even more effectively. Kieran pulled her into his arms, his shadow magic creating a cocoon of gentle darkness around them both as they stood on the cliff overlooking the ocean. Through their mate bond, Luna could feel his growing excitement as he began to imagine what their year of exploration might look like. Where would we go first? He asked, his voice taking on the playful tone she hadn't heard since their early days together. Everywhere, Luna said immediately, then laughed at her own enthusiasm. I mean, practically speaking, maybe we start with the communities that have developed the most innovative approaches to cooperative governance. The Floating Cities Confederation in Southeast Asia has created something completely unprecedented. Supernatural communities that exist entirely on the ocean, with no fixed territorial boundaries at all. And the Underground Railway in Eastern Europe, Kieran added, warming to the idea. Vampire courts, werewolf packs, and witch covens that have established a network of hidden sanctuaries for supernatural beings fleeing political persecution in human-dominated regions. The Desert Bloom Alliance in North Africa, Luna continued, her silver fire dancing with anticipation. They've figured out how to combine supernatural abilities with environmental restoration on a massive scale. Entire ecosystems brought back from the brink of collapse through cooperative magic. A year wouldn't be nearly enough time to see everything supernatural communities have created, Kieran realized. Then maybe we make it an ongoing project, Luna suggested. A few years of intensive exploration, then we establish our permanent base and use it as a headquarters for longer-term cultural exchange programs. Through their mystical connection to the global networks, they could sense the excitement their conversation was generating among supernatural communities worldwide. Not because those communities needed their constant presence, but because the idea of Luna and Kieran exploring and documenting innovative approaches to supernatural cooperation would benefit everyone. We could write about what we discover, Luna said, the idea forming as she spoke. Create resources that help communities learn from each other's successes and challenges. Not governance manuals or authority structures, but collaborative tools that support voluntary cooperation. The definitive guide to supernatural community building, Kieran said with growing enthusiasm. Written by the only permanently bonded alpha pair in history, based on direct observation of every major cooperative experiment currently active. And while we're traveling, communities that need mediation or catalytic assistance can request our help, Luna added. We wouldn't be abandoning our responsibilities, we'd be expanding them to include cultural documentation and cross-community education. The plan was taking shape with the elegant simplicity that marked their best collaborative decisions. Not retirement from their role as traveling catalysts, but evolution into something more comprehensive and sustainable. Marcus is going to love this, Kieran said with a grin. He's been suggesting for months that the Nightshade Pact territory should become a formal center for intercommunity cooperation. Having us return periodically with new insights and resources would make that even more effective. And Elena's mediation teams could benefit from detailed documentation of how different communities handle similar challenges, Luna realized. We wouldn't just be satisfying our own curiosity, we'd be contributing to the collective knowledge that makes voluntary networks stronger. Through their bond, they shared a moment of perfect synchronization as all the pieces of their future clicked into place. Travel and exploration balanced with service and responsibility. Personal growth as a mated pair integrated with their role as catalysts for supernatural cooperation. Individual fulfillment supporting community benefit, rather than competing with it. When do we leave?
Kieran asked.
Tomorrow, Luna said without hesitation. The Redwood Alliance is stable, the immediate regional conflicts have been resolved, and I saw a message in the mystical network this morning about something extraordinary happening in the Pacific Island Confederations. What kind of extraordinary? Apparently, they've figured out how to establish supernatural communities that exist partially in the spirit realm, Luna said, her voice filled with wonder. Physical territories that can shift between the material and mystical worlds depending on the community's needs. That's... Kieran paused, his tactical mind working through the implications. That's not just innovative governance. That's evolved supernatural existence. Luna, if they've really developed stable partial realm communities, the applications for territorial disputes, resource management, even human supernatural coexistence could be revolutionary. The networks won't collapse if we step back for a year? Kieran asked, his alpha instincts needing reassurance that their responsibilities would be handled. They're designed to be resilient and self-governing, Luna reminded him. And Marcus has been doing an incredible job coordinating with other voluntary network leaders. The Nightshade Pact territory has become a major hub for intercommunity cooperation. True, Kieran admitted. And Elena's Crescent Moon Alliance has established those traveling mediation teams that can handle most conflicts without us. Plus, Victoria's Council Transition Project has successfully converted most remaining traditional authority structures into cooperative governance systems, Luna added. The supernatural world has learned to function without central authority figures. So we're not abandoning our responsibilities, Kieran said, his tactical mind working through the implications. We're trusting the communities we've helped establish to continue growing and thriving on their own. Exactly, Luna confirmed. And when we come back from our year of exploration, we'll have new perspectives on how to serve supernatural communities even more effectively. Kieran pulled her into his arms, his shadow magic creating a cocoon of gentle darkness around them both as they stood on the cliff overlooking the ocean. Through their mate bond, Luna could feel his growing excitement as he began to imagine what their year of exploration might look like. "Where would we go first?" he asked, his voice taking on the playful tone she hadn't heard since their early days together. "Everywhere," Luna said immediately, then laughed at her own enthusiasm. "I mean, practically speaking, maybe we start with the communities that have developed the most innovative approaches to cooperative governance. The Floating Cities Confederation in Southeast Asia has created something completely unprecedented: supernatural communities that exist entirely on the ocean, with no fixed territorial boundaries at all. And the Underground Railway in Eastern Europe," Kieran added, warming to the idea. "Vampire courts, werewolf packs, and witch covens that have established a network of hidden sanctuaries for supernatural beings fleeing political persecution in human-dominated regions. The Desert Bloom Alliance in North Africa," Luna continued, her silver fire dancing with anticipation. "They've figured out how to combine supernatural abilities with environmental restoration on a massive scale. Entire ecosystems brought back from the brink of collapse through cooperative magic." A year wouldn't be nearly enough time to see everything supernatural communities have created, Kieran realized. "Then maybe we make it an ongoing project," Luna suggested. "A few years of intensive exploration, then we establish our permanent base and use it as a headquarters for longer-term cultural exchange programs." Through their mystical connection to the global networks, they could sense the excitement their conversation was generating among supernatural communities worldwide. Not because those communities needed their constant presence, but because the idea of Luna and Kieran exploring and documenting innovative approaches to supernatural cooperation would benefit everyone. "We could write about what we discover," Luna said, the idea forming as she spoke. "Create resources that help communities learn from each other's successes and challenges. Not governance manuals or authority structures, but collaborative tools that support voluntary cooperation. The definitive guide to supernatural community building," Kieran said with growing enthusiasm. "Written by the only permanently bonded alpha pair in history, based on direct observation of every major cooperative experiment currently active. And while we're traveling, communities that need mediation or catalytic assistance can request our help," Luna added. "We wouldn't be abandoning our responsibilities. We'd be expanding them to include cultural documentation and cross-community education." The plan was taking shape with the elegant simplicity that marked their best collaborative decisions. Not retirement from their role as traveling catalysts, but evolution into something more comprehensive and sustainable. "Marcus is going to love this," Kieran said with a grin. "He's been suggesting for months that the Nightshade Pact territory should become a formal center for intercommunity cooperation. Having us return periodically with new insights and resources would make that even more effective. And Elena's mediation teams could benefit from detailed documentation of how different communities handle similar challenges," Luna realized. "We wouldn't just be satisfying our own curiosity, we'd be contributing to the collective knowledge that makes voluntary networks stronger." Through their bond, they shared a moment of perfect synchronization as all the pieces of their future clicked into place. Travel and exploration balanced with service and responsibility. Personal growth as a mated pair integrated with their role as catalysts for supernatural cooperation. Individual fulfillment supporting community benefit rather than competing with it. "When do we leave?"
Kieran asked.
"Tomorrow," Luna said without hesitation. "The Redwood Alliance is stable, the immediate regional conflicts have been resolved, and I saw a message in the mystical network this morning about something extraordinary happening in the Pacific Island Confederations." "What kind of extraordinary?" "Apparently, they've figured out how to establish supernatural communities that exist partially in the spirit realm," Luna said, her voice filled with wonder. "Physical territories that can shift between the material and mystical worlds depending on the community's needs." "That's..." Kieran paused, his tactical mind working through the implications. "That's not just innovative governance. That's evolved supernatural existence. Luna, if they've really developed stable partial realm communities, the applications for territorial disputes, resource management, even human supernatural coexistence could be revolutionary." Exactly, Luna agreed. And the Pacific Island Confederations are requesting our assistance with expanding the partial realm techniques to communities in other geographic regions. So our first stop on the exploration year would also be our first major collaborative project, Kieran said with satisfaction. Perfect integration of personal and professional goals. Luna felt their mate bond pulse with shared excitement and anticipation as they contemplated the year ahead. Traveling together not as emergency responders or crisis mediators, but as partners exploring the incredible diversity of what supernatural communities could become when they were free to follow their own visions. There's just one thing, she said, a note of mischief entering her voice. What? If we're going to be traveling for a year, documenting innovative supernatural communities, maybe it's time we stopped presenting ourselves as the alpha pair and started being Luna and Kieran, supernatural anthropologists. Kieran's laughter echoed across the cliff, his shadow magic creating aurora-like patterns in the darkness as it danced through her silver fire. Supernatural anthropologists, he repeated. I like that. No formal authority, no political positioning, just two people who happen to have unique abilities and access to global cooperative networks. And who happen to be so deeply bonded that we can serve as catalysts for community collaboration, Luna added. And who happen to be madly in love with each other and looking forward to spending a year discovering amazing new places together, Kieran finished. They stood on the cliff in perfect harmony, their combined magic creating gentle auroras in the night sky as supernatural communities throughout the region sensed their happiness and responded with contentment of their own. Luna, Kieran said quietly, 3 years ago, when you rejected our mate bond, I thought my life was over. Tonight, looking forward to everything we're going to discover and experience together, I feel like my life is just beginning. Our life, Luna corrected, raising her hand so that silver fire danced between their joined fingers. And, Kieran, I have a feeling the best is yet to come. Through their mystical connection to the global networks, they could sense supernatural communities worldwide preparing for sleep, secure in the knowledge that their freedom was protected, their cooperation was thriving, and their future was filled with possibilities they were only beginning to explore. Tomorrow, Luna and Kieran would begin their year of exploration as supernatural anthropologists. But tonight, they were simply mates standing together under a star-filled sky, their bond stronger than ever, their love deeper than the ocean below, ready for whatever adventures awaited them. The age of supernatural independence had given birth to something beautiful, and they were about to discover just how beautiful it could become. 1 year later, Luna and Kieran stood in the central plaza of New Geneva, the first fully integrated supernatural human cooperative city in the world. Around them, the architecture itself told the story of what had become possible when communities chose collaboration over secrecy, buildings that shifted between solid stone and translucent crystal depending on the needs of their supernatural and human inhabitants, gardens where cultivated plants grew alongside human-engineered technologies. Streets that accommodated everything from werewolf pack runs to vampire transportation networks. It's incredible, Luna said, her silver fire responding to the harmonious energy signatures of thousands of humans and supernatural beings living and working together. I never imagined integration could happen this quickly. Or this successfully, Kieran added, his shadow magic picking up the complex web of cooperative agreements, mutual aid networks, and shared governance structures that made the city function. When the Antarctic Research Confederation first proposed revealing supernatural existence through scientific collaboration, I thought it would take decades to achieve stable human-supernatural coexistence. Their year of exploration had exceeded even their wildest expectations. They had documented 37 different models of supernatural community organization, from the ocean nomads who maintained no fixed territories at all to the mountain hierarchies who had evolved traditional pack structures into sophisticated democratic federations. More importantly, they had witnessed the emergence of something entirely unprecedented: supernatural communities confident enough in their own strength and stability to choose voluntary revelation and integration with human society. The voluntary networks made all the difference, Luna observed, watching a mixed group of human scientists and supernatural researchers emerge from one of the city's integration laboratories. Instead of individual communities having to navigate human contact alone, they had the support of global cooperative structures. And instead of humans encountering supernatural beings as isolated anomalies, they were introduced to entire networks of stable, self-governing communities, Kieran continued. It changed the entire dynamic from fear and control to curiosity and collaboration. Through their mystical connection to the global networks, they could sense similar integration experiments happening in dozens of locations worldwide. Not every supernatural community was choosing revelation. Many preferred continued secrecy, and the network supported those choices as well. But for those who wanted to explore human-supernatural cooperation, the infrastructure for safe, successful integration was now available. Luna, Kieran, a familiar voice called from across the plaza. They turned to see Marcus approaching with Elena, both of them wearing the satisfied expressions of people who had just finished successful negotiations. The Integration Council? Luna asked, though their mystical senses were already picking up the positive energy signatures that indicated successful resolution. Unanimous approval for the next phase of expansion, Elena reported. 12 more cities worldwide have been selected as integration pilot sites, with voluntary network support for both human and supernatural communities throughout the process. And the opposition coalition? Kieran asked, referring to the alliance of former council members and human government groups that had been working to prevent supernatural revelation. Fragmenting rapidly, Marcus said with deep satisfaction. Turns out that when humans are introduced to supernatural beings through positive scientific and cultural collaboration, fear-based political movements lose most of their appeal. Luna felt a warm glow of satisfaction through her mate bond with Kieran. The opposition coalition had been their greatest concern during the integration process, not because they posed a direct threat to supernatural communities, but because political movements based on fear and control could have made human supernatural cooperation impossible for generations. How are the individual communities adapting? Luna asked, her anthropologist's instincts focused on the practical details of such massive social change. Better than anyone expected, Elena replied. The Redwood Alliance you two helped establish is serving as a model for dozens of similar cooperative structures. The integration support networks that developed from your documentation work are helping communities navigate challenges that would have been insurmountable for isolated groups. Speaking of your documentation work, Marcus said with a grin, the Council of Cooperative Networks has formally requested that you two consider establishing the Institute for Supernatural Anthropology as a permanent resource for communities worldwide. Luna and Kieran exchanged a look of shared surprise and excitement. The Institute had begun as an informal project to organize their travel documentation, but it had evolved into something much more significant as supernatural communities used their research to develop new approaches to cooperation and integration. Permanent base, global reach, continued travel and research opportunities, Kieran said thoughtfully. It could be exactly what we were looking for. Where would we establish it? Luna asked. New Geneva seems like the obvious choice, Elena suggested. First integrated city, established infrastructure for human supernatural cooperation, central location for both European and global networks. Plus, Marcus added with a meaningful look, the Nightshade Pact territory has become so central to voluntary network coordination that we're planning to establish a permanent cooperation center there as well. You two could split your time between local base operations and international research travel. Luna felt tears of happiness on her cheeks as she realized what her friends were offering. Not just a permanent home, but a way to maintain their role as traveling catalysts while also building the kind of stable foundation that would let their relationship and their work flourish together. The Institute for Supernatural Anthropology, she said, testing how the words felt. Dedicated to documenting and supporting innovative approaches to supernatural community organization and human supernatural cooperation. With branch offices in every major voluntary network hub, Kieran added, his tactical mind already working through the practical implications. Research teams, mediation services, cultural exchange programs. And at the center of it all, Marcus interrupted with a broad smile, the first permanently bonded alpha pair in history, using their unique abilities to help communities worldwide discover what they're capable of when they're free to pursue their own visions. Through their mystical connection to the global networks, Luna and Kieran could sense excitement building among supernatural communities as news of the proposed institute spread. Not because communities needed central authority, but because the idea of permanent infrastructure supporting voluntary cooperation and cultural exchange would make their own local efforts more effective. "We need to be careful about maintaining the voluntary nature of the networks," Luna said, her political instincts recognizing the potential for even well-intentioned permanent institutions to accumulate inappropriate authority. "Which is why the institute would be funded and governed cooperatively," Elena explained. "No single community or authority structure would control it. Instead, it would be accountable to the voluntary networks themselves, with governance structures based on consensus and mutual aid rather than hierarchy. A permanent institution that serves cooperative networks rather than controlling them," Kieran said with growing enthusiasm. "Luna, it could be the perfect evolution of everything we've been working toward." Luna looked around the plaza of New Geneva, watching humans and supernatural beings collaborate on projects that would have been impossible just 2 years earlier. She thought about the communities they'd visited during their year of exploration, the innovative approaches to cooperation they documented, the integration experiments that were proving successful beyond anyone's wildest expectations. Most importantly, she thought about the mate bond she shared with Kieran, stronger than ever, a source of joy and strength that grew deeper with each shared challenge and triumph. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes," Kieran asked, though their bond was already carrying the full depth of her agreement and excitement. "Yes to the Institute. Yes to New Geneva. Yes to splitting our time between local operations and international research. Yes to helping build permanent infrastructure for voluntary cooperation," Luna said, her silver fire dancing with anticipation. "And yes to spending the rest of our very long lives discovering what supernatural communities can become when they're free to pursue their own dreams." Kieran swept her into his arms, his shadow magic creating aurora patterns in the afternoon sky as their combined power responded to shared joy and determination. Around them in the plaza, humans and supernatural beings paused in their own activities to smile at the obvious happiness of the couple whose work had made their own cooperation possible. "The Institute for Supernatural Anthropology," Marcus said formally. "I hereby propose that Luna Silvermoon and Kieran Nightshade be recognized as the founding directors of the first permanent institution dedicated to supporting voluntary cooperation among supernatural communities worldwide." "Seconded," Elena said immediately. Through their mystical connection to the global networks, they could sense thousands of supernatural communities worldwide adding their agreement to the proposal. Not a vote imposed by central authority, but a spontaneous expression of support from the very communities the Institute would serve. "It's unanimous," Luna said with wonder. "Every community in the voluntary networks is supporting the proposal." "Because they know you," Kieran realized. "Not as potential authority figures, but as partners who have spent years proving that your power serves communities rather than controlling them." Luna felt her mate bond with Kieran pulse with absolute contentment as she contemplated their future. Director of the Institute for Supernatural Anthropology, based in the world's first integrated city, traveling regularly to document and support innovative approaches to cooperation, helping communities worldwide discover their full potential. "What more could we possibly want?" she asked. "Nothing," Kieran said immediately. "Luna, we have everything. Meaningful work that serves communities we care about. A home base that's at the center of positive social change. The freedom to travel and explore and discover new things together. And most importantly, we have each other." "Forever," Luna agreed, raising her hand so that silver fire danced between their joined fingers. "Forever," Kieran confirmed, his shadow magic weaving through her power in patterns that spoke of eternal partnership. Around them, the plaza of New Geneva hummed with the energy of humans and supernatural beings, building something beautiful together. Through their mystical connection to the global networks, they could sense similar scenes of cooperation and mutual flourishing happening in communities worldwide. The age of supernatural independence had become the age of conscious cooperation. And at the center of it all, Luna and Kieran stood hand in hand, their mate bond stronger than ever, ready for whatever adventures their shared future might bring. 5 years after the founding of the Institute for Supernatural Anthropology, Luna stood in the observatory atop their new Geneva headquarters, watching the sunset paint the integrated city in shades of gold and silver that perfectly matched the harmony between its human and supernatural inhabitants. Through the mystical network that now connected communities across multiple continents, she could sense the contentment of millions of beings living in cooperative societies that had seemed impossible just a few years earlier. The latest reports from the integration pilot sites. Kieran asked, joining her at the observatory windows with a steaming cup of the herbal tea that had become their evening ritual. Beyond our wildest expectations, Luna replied, accepting her own cup with a smile that had only grown more radiant with each passing year. The Tokyo confluence has achieved complete cultural integration between 3 supernatural species and human communities. The Amazon Alliance has developed sustainable technologies that combine mystical and scientific approaches to environmental restoration. And the Sahara Cooperative has successfully established the first supernatural human settlements in previously uninhabitable regions. The voluntary networks are evolving faster than we can document, Kieran observed, his shadow magic unconsciously weaving through Luna's silver fire in patterns that had become as natural as breathing. Sometimes I think our anthropological work is less about documenting what exists and more about trying to keep up with what communities are creating. Luna laughed, the sound carrying through the mystical network and generating tiny sparks of happiness in supernatural communities worldwide. After 5 years as traveling catalysts and documentation specialists, their mate bond had become so integrated with the global cooperative networks that their emotional states subtly influenced the well-being of millions of supernatural beings. Speaking of keeping up with what communities are creating, she said, pulling a crystalline data storage device from her pocket, the Antarctic Research Confederation sent their final report on the Interdimensional Cooperation Project. Kieran's eyebrows rose. Final report? I thought they were still in the preliminary testing phase. They were, until yesterday, Luna said with barely contained excitement. Kieran, they've done it. They've established stable communication and cooperation protocols with supernatural communities in parallel dimensions. We're not just looking at human supernatural integration anymore. We're looking at multidimensional civilization. The implications hit Kieran like a physical blow. Through their mate bond, Luna felt his consciousness expand as he grasped what the Antarctic team had achieved. Not just contact with other dimensions, but the foundation for cooperative relationships between supernatural communities across multiple realities. How many dimensions? He asked quietly. 17 confirmed, with indications of at least 40 more that could support stable communication, Luna replied. And Kieran, the dimensional communities are using voluntary network structures almost identical to what we've developed here. Cooperation and mutual aid seem to be universal constants across supernatural societies. Through their mystical connection to the global networks, they could sense the excitement building as news of the dimensional breakthrough spread. Not fear or uncertainty, but anticipation for new forms of cooperation and cultural exchange that would expand their understanding of what supernatural existence could become. The Institute is going to need a dimensional studies department, Kieran said with a grin. Already approved by the Cooperative Governance Council, Luna confirmed. Along with expanded research facilities, additional travel teams, and preparation for the first interdimensional cultural exchange program. When do we leave for Antarctica? Kieran asked, though his enhanced senses were already picking up the excitement in her emotional signature that suggested she'd been planning this conversation for days. Next week, Luna said immediately. But Kieran, this won't be like our other research trips. We're not just documenting what exists. We're helping to establish the protocols and frameworks that will govern multidimensional cooperation for generations. The first supernatural anthropologists to study interdimensional civilization, Kieran said thoughtfully. Our work is going to influence how billions of beings across multiple realities relate to each other. Exactly, Luna agreed. Which is why the cooperative networks want us to approach this as more than just research. They're asking us to serve as the primary diplomatic team for initial contact protocols. Luna felt their mate bond pulse with shared understanding of the magnitude of what they were being asked to do. Not just observation and documentation, but active participation in establishing relationships between supernatural communities across dimensional boundaries. Luna, Kieran said quietly, when you rejected our mate bond 7 years ago, could you have imagined that we'd end up here? Permanently bonded alpha pair, directors of a global anthropological institute, about to become the first interdimensional diplomats in supernatural history. Never, Luna admitted, taking his hands and letting their combined magic create gentle aurora patterns in the observatory's crystal dome. But Kieran, every step of this journey has felt inevitable once we were on it. Like we were always meant to be partners in helping supernatural communities discover what they're capable of. Even the curse that nearly kept us apart, Kieran realized. If the moon goddess bloodline magic hadn't been dormant for so long, if it hadn't required such specific circumstances to awaken safely, we might never have developed the voluntary network structures that made global transformation possible. And without the global transformation, we never would have had communities strong enough and stable enough to attempt interdimensional contact, Luna continued. It's like everything, the curse, the rejection, the council's oppression, even the years of separation, was preparing us for this moment. Through their mystical connection to the global networks, they could sense similar realizations happening in supernatural communities worldwide. The understanding that their individual struggles and triumphs had been part of a larger pattern leading toward unprecedented expansion of cooperative possibility. What do you think we'll find?
Kieran asked.
In the other dimensions? Communities of beings who have been waiting for someone to figure out how to establish stable contact, Luna said with growing certainty. Kieran, I think the voluntary networks we've developed here aren't just successful governance structures. They're the foundation for multidimensional civilization. Cooperation that spans realities instead of just territories, Kieran said with wonder. Mutual aid networks that connect beings across dimensional boundaries, Luna added. Cultural exchange programs that include entirely different forms of existence, Kieran continued. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the last light fade from the New Geneva skyline while their enhanced senses picked up the healthy energy signatures of humans and supernatural beings settling in for the night throughout the integrated city. Luna, Kieran said finally, I need you to know that whatever we discover in other dimensions, whatever challenges or opportunities interdimensional cooperation brings, the most important thing in any reality is that we're facing it together. Luna felt tears of happiness on her cheeks as she turned to face him fully. 7 years after rejecting their mate bond to protect him from a curse that turned out to be a safeguard, 5 years after becoming permanently bonded alpha partners, their love had only grown deeper and more profound with each shared challenge and triumph. Together, she agreed, echoing the word that had become their shared promise and foundation. Forever, Kieran added, his shadow magic creating intricate patterns of protection and partnership around them both. Across all dimensions, Luna finished, her silver fire dancing through his darkness in symbols of eternal cooperation and love. Through their mystical connection to the global networks, supernatural communities worldwide felt a pulse of contentment and anticipation that spoke of magnificent things to come. The age of supernatural independence had become the age of conscious cooperation, which was now becoming the age of multidimensional possibility. And at the center of it all, Luna and Kieran stood hand in hand in their observatory above the world's first integrated city, their mate bond stronger than ever, their love deeper than any single reality could contain, ready for whatever adventures awaited them in the infinite possibilities of cooperative existence. The best was yet to come. 10 years later, in a dimension where aurora light danced through crystalline forests and supernatural beings had evolved beyond the need for physical form, Luna and Kieran's interdimensional research station hummed with the energy of cooperation projects that spanned 17 different realities. Their original mission to document innovative supernatural communities had evolved into something far more ambitious, the coordination of multidimensional civilization itself. The Unity Network spans 43 dimensions now, Luna reported during their weekly connection to the home reality networks, her consciousness existing simultaneously in multiple forms of being while maintaining her essential connection to Kieran. Communities across all realities are developing governance structures based on voluntary cooperation rather than hierarchical control. And the integration programs? Came Elena's voice through the mystical communication array, warm with the satisfaction of someone whose own local networks had exceeded every expectation for successful human supernatural cooperation. Beyond anything we imagined possible, Kieran replied, his shadow magic now capable of creating stable bridges between dimensional boundaries. We're not just observing cultural exchange anymore, we're participating in the creation of entirely new forms of cooperative existence. Through their mate bond, enhanced by years of interdimensional exploration, Luna and Kieran shared consciousness across multiple realities while maintaining their essential partnership. They had become something unprecedented in supernatural history, permanently bonded partners whose love and cooperation had become the foundation for civilization itself. The Institute's latest report reaches some interesting conclusions about the future of supernatural society, Marcus added, his voice carrying through dimensions with the pride of someone whose local administration had enabled global transformation. Luna, Kieran, you two didn't just help communities discover their potential. You helped all of existence discover what's possible when cooperation becomes the fundamental organizing principle. Luna felt their mate bond pulse with deep satisfaction as she contemplated the journey that had brought them to this moment. From rejected mates hiding in subway tunnels to interdimensional diplomats coordinating cooperation across multiple realities, their love had become something that strengthened not just individuals or communities, but existence itself. "What's next?" she asked, though the question was rhetorical. Through the Unity Network, they could already sense new dimensions awakening to the possibility of cooperative contact, new forms of existence preparing to join the ever-expanding web of voluntary mutual aid that connected beings across all realities. "Everything," Kieran replied simply, his love for her constant across all dimensions, in all forms of existence, through every possible evolution of what they might become together. "Everything," Luna agreed, their mate bond now strong enough to create new realities where love and cooperation weren't just ideals, but the fundamental forces that shaped all existence. In dimensions beyond counting, supernatural beings felt the pulse of their eternal partnership and knew that no matter how far consciousness evolved, no matter what new forms existence might take, the foundation would always be the same. Love that serves others, power that strengthens communities, and partnerships that make all beings more than they could ever be alone. The age of multidimensional cooperation had begun, and Luna and Kieran stood at its heart, eternally bonded, eternally growing, eternally discovering new ways to help existence itself flourish through the magic of voluntary love.